Welcome to the December 14th regular meeting of the City of Arcata's Planning Commission. We're holding this meeting as a webinar in response to local efforts to reduce the spread of the COVID-19 virus. If you wish to make a public comment during the meeting, there are two ways. If you are at your computer when the commission is discussing the agenda item in which you would like to speak, please use the raised hand icon. When the public comment period opens and it's your turn, you'll get a notice when the clerk unmutes you and you'll have 2 minutes to comment. If you were on your phone, you can still join the meeting by calling the number and meeting ID, all shown at the bottom of the screen. Press *9 to let the clerk know you wish to speak. When the public comment period opens and it's your turn, the clerk will unmute you and you'll hear a prompt and you'll have 2 minutes to comment. So this meeting is now officially called to order. Director Loya, can we get a roll call, please?
Absolutely. Chair Besaid Alcock?
Here.
Vice Chair Mayer?
Here.
Commissioner Davies?
Here.
Commissioner Barstow? That was a here. Commissioner Figueroa?
Here.
Commissioner Tagney?
Here.
And Commissioner White is absent.
Thank you. And at the staff's table, we have David Loya, Director of Community Development. I think we probably have Joe Mateer, Senior Planner, in there somewhere. But who else is with us tonight, David?
That's it for the staff table.
Okay. All right. I got to get my light right here. Sorry. Okay. Let's see here. So let's move on to oral communications. This time is provided for people to address the commission or submit written communications on matters not on the agenda for tonight. At the conclusion of all oral and written communications, the commission may respond to statements. Any request that requires commission actions will be set by the commission for a future agenda or referred to staff. Is there any member of the public who would like to address the commission tonight? No. Yes?
I'm not seeing any.
Okay. Okay. We do not have minute but consent calendar, but we do need to modify the agenda.
I'm sorry, I do have one person who's raising
Yes.
their hand.
Please.
Carol, did you have some oral communications for items not on the agenda tonight?
I did. I was just, I have oral comments about one of the projects, but it's 3 minutes long, and that's what it said on your agenda, that they could be 3 minutes long, and mine is 3 minutes. Is that
Okay.
good?
Is that your comment for oral communications?
Yes, and I'm just curious as to why it's been changed to 2.
Okay. The chair will address that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything else?
That's it for oral communications.
Okay, so we don't have minutes from our last meeting, which was forever ago, but we do need to modify the agenda. We need to add the housing for homeless combining zone. We need to take that from the public, our business items, and we need to add it onto the public items. So we need to modify the agenda.
Yeah, so that would take a motion, a second, and affirmative vote of the majority.
Motion to modify the agenda.
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
Wait, can I ask a question, please?
Mhm.
What that means? Are you saying you need to turn it into a public hearing instead of a business item?
Yeah, the item number 1 under business items was unintentionally listed as a business item. It's a public hearing. It was formally noticed as a public hearing, and that's the section it should fall under. It's really just an administrative change to the agenda.
Okay.
I would like to make a motion that we consider resolution number PC-21-08, amending the housing for homeless combining zone, allowing permanent supportive housing at 2 locations in the Valley West neighborhood to be moved from a business item to a public hearing item.
We have a first. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a second by Figueroa. So can we get a roll call, please?
Davies?
Aye.
Barstow,
Aye.
Figueroa,
Aye.
Tagny,
Aye.
Vice Chair Mayor,
Yes.
and Chair Vasek Elcock.
Yes. Okay, motion passes. So let's see here. So we have 3 public hearing items to consider this evening. Our first one will be the minor use permit for Hambro products. Before we open the public hearing, do we have any commissioners who have an ex parte communications to disclose? No? Okay, can we get a staff report, please?
Yes, good evening. I have a PowerPoint presentation the director will be sharing with us. Thank you. Tonight before you is the minor use permit for Hambro Forest Products to operate a recycling processing facility at 420 South G Street in Arcata. I know that I don't need to mention to the community that this is a long-awaited and exciting project to have in our community, but it's going to serve regional outlying Humboldt area as well. Next slide, please. Tonight, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission approve this action before you. Found in the staff report is attachment A. There's findings of approval that are included in your packet, and that's Exhibit 1. The recommended conditions of approval will be found in your Planning Commission packet, Attachment 1, Exhibit 2, and it's based on the application material that you'll find in as Attachment A, Exhibit 3. Next slide, please. This is a general vicinity location. It's almost directly east of the Arcata Marsh and Wildlife Sanctuary Interpretive Center. It's on South G Street. There's many industrial uses in the area. And we do have, the Arcata Marsh and Wildlife Sanctuary that is located across South G Street. The project is located in the coastal zone. The project meets the Coastal Land Use and Development Guide Coastal Industrial Commercial Zoning District. So the findings of approval that you have before you tonight are based on the Arcata Land Use Code only. The project, as I mentioned, is in the coastal zone. It's in the state's coastal development permit jurisdiction. A separate action will be taken at the state level for the coastal development permit on this project. It's a portion of a 2-acre site. They're leasing about over half of that section. They do have shared access that they share with the other land uses further east, portions of the subject property, and then there's a separate parcel further east that have shared access there. There's an existing 5,000 square foot metal building there. It's used as kind of a workshop for trucking. There's 4 roll-up doors on each the east and west elevations. There's a large 1,600 square foot awning that is at the rear of the building. There is a structure that is called the Modular Classroom. You'll see here it's marked as not a part. That will come up later in our discussions, and it's in the staff report about that. So this is a California Redemption Cycle Recycling Center. What they do is they collect and process all the material that people want to have their product, their bottles and cans redeemed. They'll drive in, loop around the building, and then queue up in front of the building on the west elevation. There's the Hambro Forest Products. They operate in Del Norte County. They're well-versed in how this operation works. They have shipping off to Redding, and then later on into the products get shipped down to the Bay Area. And we do have a letter of support that came from one of the major recycling processors in the Bay Area that really supports this project. Again, this is a recycling processing facility, only for the CRV, the California Redemption Value product. So it's the cans, aluminum cans, and glass bottles and plastic bottles that a consumer purchased in California and paid the recycling deposit for that. What they'll do is collect those, weigh the material, and then once they have kind of the bulk supplies, they'll crush it with a baler. That would be the cans and the plastic bottles. and then they'll crush the glass. So the idea is to reduce the volume by compacting those items. They'll put the glass in super sacks, and once they have enough material, they'll ship them off to Reading and then for further processing down in the Bay Area. Next slide, please. The findings of approval are recommended as being in compliance with the Arcata General Plan and the Land Use Code for that. There are certain specific recommendations and standards for recycling facilities. And this one is a processing facility. So the findings of approval does go through each one of those standards, and we address those. Like the trucking, they have no more than 2 outbound trucks a day. The volume that this is proposed by the Hambro products is well below that, even if they do bring in other materials from another collection site. And as suggested in the application material, they might want to collect, have the services available, redemption services like in the Garberville, Southern Humboldt area, and then bring the material up here to process for shipping off to Reading or other sites there. We do there's a requirement for the size and screening, and so the conditions of approval are all designed to ensure and augment the application is conducive with the zoning standards. Staff did add a couple different conditions of approval that I'll discuss later, but it was related to stormwater, noise, flooding, and outdoor light, and also traffic. The project is supported by the California Environmental Quality Act categorical exemptions of Class 1, Class 3, and Class 32. And we recommend that the Planning Commission go ahead and adopt those with the action. Next slide, please. There is one item that I do want to add for a condition of approval, and it came through a referral with the city engineer, and they just wanted to make sure that there was adequate accessible parking as required by accessible regulations. So I just want to highlight that it is somewhat embedded in a condition of B1, but I wanted to really highlight that as a requirement for them. Some of the other ones I want to highlight is the modular unit. We don't have any record of any building permit for that. The project is located in a flood zone, and there are certain foundation requirements that need to be followed. So we want to make sure that doesn't float out if we happen to have some high waters during a flood event. So it's a public safety element. They could relocate that, demolish it, or do something like anything, but we just need to make sure they have proper permits for that. Right now, it is not a part of the project. It's my understanding that the property owner utilizes that building, and it's not part of the lease area, even though it's within the lease area of the Hambro facility. To be honest with you, I believe that it would provide better circulation and storage and use of the property if they did have access, if that modular unit was gone. But we're not making any recommendation to remove it or demolish it. We just need to make sure it has proper permits for flood safety control. One of the items that came up during our discussion was the traffic management plan. We don't think the daily operations are going to be an issue with the traffic. They have adequate queuing area. They have experience on how to manage the vehicles as they enter the property, flow through the process. What we're really concerned about is the people have been stockpiling. We haven't had this use and this ability to take our product and get our money that we gave. It does belong to the consumers that paid that deposit. And so there is evidence of stockpiling of material, and we expect that the community is going to really embrace the business and take their opportunity to get their product redeemed there. What we're really concerned about is almost like a special event. We have evidence of traffic with the certain formula restaurants that were operated in Eureka, even the opening of the recycling facility for the CRV redemption within the Humboldt Bay or Humboldt Waste Management Group. They did have traffic backup. And so we were really asking for kind of a traffic management plan to really manage that initial surge that we expect to happen because our community members have not had this service in some time now. And also the stormwater management plan, we figured that will include some dust control measures, some low impact development, some landscaping that will help with screening as well. Noise reduction came up and we are asking for a noise reduction plan. We do feel that although there aren't any identified sensitive noise receptors like a hospital, school, nursing home, auditoriums or theater, we are treating the Arcata Marsh and Wildlife Sanctuary as a sensitive noise receptor, not only for the people that go there for enjoying their passive recreational activities, but also the wildlife and that are there as well. So we do have a requirement for them to prepare a noise reduction plan and submit and implement. Next slide, please. Again, the recommendation is to approve this minor use permit by adopting the action. The action does include the findings of approval along with the environmental review requirements, conditions of approval, and they all are based on the project description and plans. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the Planning Commission has. I do know that the representatives of the project are available here to answer any questions as well. Thank you for your time.
Just before we turn it over for questions and deliberations, I did want to double down on the point about the noise condition of approval, and that is that the project is being asked to demonstrate that it meets the existing noise standards. So there's nothing above and beyond or nothing out of the ordinary. It's just that we know this is a noisy operation, and if they can show through normal operations that they meet the noise ordinance, they're good to go. Otherwise, they need to pair some form of amelioration to that noise that their use is creating. So I just wanted to be clear about that with the council and with the applicant.
Thank you. So before we open this to public hearing, I think we have a few questions for staff. Commissioner Mayer.
Yes, thank you very much. It does appear that this is certainly a service the public needs at this point. I did want to ask for clarification, perhaps either staff or someone from Hambro can provide that. How long would the facility need to operate under generator power before PG&E can complete the appropriate work to give a permanent electrical upgrade? And the follow-up question is, would there be anything that the city or even the county could do to expedite that? And the next follow-up question is, if it appears that no one knows, what would be the consequences of delaying the beginning of operations there until the appropriate electrical work can be completed? I have several other questions too, but if there's an answer from staff there, that would be great. Otherwise, I'm very happy to wait until someone from Hambro can explain it as part of their introduction.
Yes, good questions. I believe that the agent and Hambro representatives are in direct contact with PG&E, and they'd be best to answer that. I don't know about any expediting with that. And then if I could get clarification on your last item, the question, something about timing, delaying it until the power service is available.
I think that's a question for Hambro as well.
Okay.
What would it mean to their operations if we didn't approve the generator for a short period of time? Is that the question?
And
Sure.
the reason I'm asking staff is I'd like to know what it means for the public to operating large-scale generators within the city over a long period of time is not something, it's not a good thing. And so rather than going into this operation with no idea how long the generator would be operating. I think an appropriate condition of approval might be to provide that information and to make some promises, which may involve bringing PG&E into the discussion.
I think that would be a good discussion to start with, having Hambro address it, because I believe that there are some short-term durations for their use of that piece of equipment.
Okay, great. Another question I had is, I do really appreciate that despite having mentioned in one section of the proposal, I think project 16, that there were no sensitive environments nearby. I appreciate that the city is seeing the Arcata Marsh as sensitive to things like noise and light. One thing I am wondering is, would there be a monitoring program in place with regard to things like noise and dust, or would the city's actions be entirely complaint driven? And it might be worth discussing whether there ought to be some requirement for monitoring in any condition of approval. Is there any monitoring program envisioned here as part of the city's role beyond responding
well,
to complaints?
I can attempt to answer that question for you, the Commissioner Mayor. That's a great question. I appreciate you bringing that up. Explicitly, we did include monitoring and mention in the noise ordinance about the operations, because we could have a plan on paper and it all looks great, but then once they start to operate, and then they do the monitoring, they realize that, with this door opener, this piece of equipment, there's going to be an excessive amount of noise. And so it's built in that they adjust that. And we do have ongoing monitoring of all of our outdoor lighting and any conditions of approval for the most part, because that is kind of a contractual agreement that we're making the public with the operators there. So once we go ahead and approve this, we do try to work with the operators of these business on an ongoing basis if there are any noticeable objections or conflicts with our conditions of approval or findings.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And finally, a last question, comment. I did notice that in the Coastal Commission's response for requests for comments, which is in addition to the separate coastal development permit that the Coastal Commission itself would need to issue for this project to go ahead. Bente Janssen did suggest that there ought to be a limited term for this operational permit. And given what sea level rise is expected to do in that area, staff responded that they didn't think that was necessary because all of the equipment is movable, and the operators would know when it was time to pick up and move it. My sense is that a limited duration with an opportunity for renewal for any conditional use permit or minor use permit on South G and H streets might not be a bad idea and could be actually built into our local coastal program. Staff has rejected that. This is an opportunity to do it for a project where, floating debris in the event of a flood could actually be a huge problem. And so I'm wondering if either staff or Hambro would respond to that when it's time.
Can I just respond to that just a little bit, Joe? So right now we don't have policies adopted in our local coastal program that would require, time limits or restrictions on uses based on trigger points and thresholds related to sea level rise. We certainly are building those into our updated local coastal program and anticipate having them, sometime in the next year. Because of this, because of this lack of policy underpinning, we didn't support a one-off decision to limit the time frame for this particular permit. However, I think it really is up to the Hambro group to let us know if they would like to have a time limit. The referrals that we received from the Coastal Commission indicated that may weigh into the city's limitation on time, may weigh into their decision as to what permit pathway they choose to go. And so, to my knowledge, and unless Joe, you've had an update, I don't believe we've gotten a response to that. So it's really up to Hambro to let us know, and then it's up to the commission to, have those deliberations and maybe come up with some real solid, nexus and proportionality findings that it can make to implement that as a condition of approval if Hambro is not asking for that. So two kind of pathways on resolving that, if you will.
Okay. Yeah. I think one of the things that to keep in mind is that putting a time limit as generous as 20 years on something like that wouldn't necessarily mean there would be no permit after that, is that the city would have an opportunity to reopen the conditions for operation and build in whatever benchmarks and guidelines seem appropriate at that time. So yeah, it would be great to hear some more about that.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other commissioners who had questions for staff before we open this to public hearing? No. I just had two questions, not questions. One's a statement. One is about the parking. Looks like you addressed that about the accessible parking. I only see 7 parking spaces, and I know that the accessible will take 2. So it looks like we're going to be short, so they need to somehow squeeze in more parking. So you already know that, I'm sure. And then I had a question too about the owner of the property. He needs to get or she, I actually don't know who the owner is, needs to get a permit for that other building before you'll allow this project to go through. Is that what I was reading?
The condition of approval is, well, all the required, conditions of approval are supposed to be met before operations. In this case, it is one of those interesting situations where it's the property owner is managing that facility, and it's a little bit out of the control of Hambro Group. So we expect that there's going to be a discussion with the city property owner and the Hambro Group to come to terms with how we're going to move forward on that structure itself. So I would say that if that was the last limiting factor of getting them to be operational, that we would work with the applicants to move forward with operations, even if that wasn't moved. But I could be, it does say to the city engineer, to the satisfaction of the city engineer. So I'm sure that that would be something that's their decision, not mine.
Okay, well, Commissioner Figueroa, you have some questions?
Okay, I just wanted to get some clarification just really quickly. The mention of stormwater management plan, are we related to a document that needs to be created for the city, or are we talking about stormwater pollution prevention plan through the industrial general permit through the water boards? I just wanted to just get some clarification regarding that for this specific project.
Yes, they're going to be going through the water board for that stormwater pollution prevention plan. But we wanted to also have a little more details and have a chance to review it as well, and try to incorporate other maybe low impact designs and some of the landscaping that might help with the screening process and stuff like that. So that was a kind of discussion that came up through the referral process with both the city environmental services department and also the referral through the Coastal Commission. So we wanted to have a little bit more information, and according to the agent, they are going to be submitting all those documents to the water board, but we still wanted to have some review locally.
Okay, Joe, just to be clear then, so we're looking at two different things. Then we're looking at SWIP for stormwater, and then we're looking at the MS4 low impact development requirements, essentially within that's required by the city. Is that what we're talking about in regard to using?
And part of that was related to, there's a part of the parking lot is asphalt in the property. And then the other part is the circular where it's gravel. And so there's dust, and there is a DI out in front of the building itself. And we just want to make sure that we have an idea how they're going to move that water across the property and treat it properly.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, if not, let's open the public hearing. And would the applicant like to be the first to respond?
Yes, and I was going to respond to the PG&E upgrade. So we have our application in for the upgrade with PG&E. Our representative there has been out sick and has not been allowed to visit the public. So the next step on that is a site visit. And we want to get the ball rolling for the design and development of the project. So he feels like that he gets out there and take a look, we'll have a lot better idea how long it will take to do the upgrade. You guys mentioned about maybe some influence or something from the city or county to help speed that along. We want to get that going now, and so that while we're going through this time with you folks, and then going through Coastal, we're burning the clock, so to speak, on the time that we can go through design and review of PG. Anticipated time, it's kind of hard to tell, but it could be for the generator, it could be 4 to 6 months. It all depends on when we can get this upgrade done. And another thing about the generator, it does not need to run all the time. We have power there to run the light, to run the scales, to run the computers, all that kind of stuff. So we can buy back material and start the generator when we need to bail or break glass. So that's what the upgrade is for. So there could be start and stops with the generator, it won't be all day long. Any more questions about the tower? I think it's definitely in progress, the upgrade and doing the work to get it.
Can you also just describe what noise attenuation would be associated with the generator?
It's advertised, I think it was 73 decibels, but there's ways we can buy, and they often rent noise containment products, and we can put around it. We can put a building up. We can do a lot of things, whatever we need to do to control it.
I'll also note that Bob Brown with SHN, agent for Hambro, has joined us. I didn't see him in the audience until he rose his hand. So,
Bob, would you like to make a comment?
Yeah. As far as the length of the generator, and I go at it, Randy Scott from Hambro was talking, and across the table was David Slagle, the president and CEO of Hambro Group, and wanted to introduce them. My name is Bob Brown with SHN as the agent. So yeah, I mean, our next step would be going through the Coastal Commission. So obviously won't be a need for the generator until we complete that process. But as Randy had mentioned, it would probably be a 3 to 6 month process. So picturing July. Certainly any support that the city or county or anybody can provide. I mean, once we get on that road, we might request the city to provide a letter asking for this to speed up. But As far as the attenuation, Randy mentioned the reduction of noise using the shield. There are other methods. So the closest property line, again, the generator will be behind the building. And so you won't get that noise going towards the Arcata Marsh and Wildlife Sanctuary, but the closest property line is to the south, which is Brandt Electric and the pottery kiln businesses that are there. So, you know, certainly attenuating it with any kind of the shielding, pointing away the, again, the noise comes out of where the exhaust is. So pointing the exhaust away from that use, pointing it maybe towards the north or towards the east. Even if necessary, a wall could be constructed. Right now, the modular unit would be blocking the noise, so it has a purpose while it's there. Anyway, I think, you know, that, you know, and I don't want to speak for Hambro, but they have been receiving a lot of comment about, you know, when is this facility going to get going and such. So I think they would say that, you know, as soon as we can get this going, it would be really helpful. So delaying because of the generator, I think that, you know, the noise study will require that the generator noise will also be addressed. And so hope that you wouldn't delay, but the noise study and then the monitoring that would occur, and Joe mentioned the monitoring that would be proposed as part of the noise attenuation study. I'm trying to think, you know, we addressed the limited term, and I'm not really sure on the utility of that. And thinking about it, there isn't a lot of floating stockpile material. This is regularly processed. So we're talking about, you know, 750 to 1,000 pound baled material that isn't going to be moving if it comes up. So, you know, if you look at either the city, because of the wastewater treatment plant and the public works station, as the staff report mentions, the city's either going to do something with South G Street to raise it out of the sea level rise when we reach that point, or it's going to be closed down during the high tides. You know, maybe that's 6 to 8 times a year. At some point, it'll be longer. And at that point, I mean, it doesn't make sense to have any business down there. So that's why I think the comment about it being able to be moved, there's not an investment being put in to this property or to this building. It's just the portable equipment that is used for processing. So we didn't really think it was needed as far as a term. And I also think that if the Coastal Commission is concerned about that, we're trying to get through their process. If they feel it's necessary, I think that they would add that as a requirement, or we would propose it as part of our revised project with them. Yeah, there are other parking areas that are already paved. We're not likely to utilize the truck scales that are there. So looking at that as whether that is appropriate for ADA or other areas on the property. Again, we're trying to keep the paving amount down in order to, you know, for the stormwater pollution prevention plan. So Commissioner Figueroa mentioned the SWIP, and I just want to mention that this project will also be subject to the general industrial permit, or the industrial general permit, which is ongoing. So there will be ongoing monitoring. So it won't be just the SWIP and the MS4, but also the ongoing requirements for sampling for that project. I don't know if I think I addressed all the concerns that were brought up. I didn't prepare anything. I knew the city was going to be doing a thorough job on their analysis and presentation, and I'll just, you know, again, support staff's recommendation, and I'll reserve any kind of comments for any comments that the commissioners might have or are raised during the public comment period.
Great, thank you. We'll circle back there to you. So are there any members of the public who would like to comment on this project?
If you'd like to comment on the project, please click the raise hand button. I am seeing none.
All right, so does the applicant or the representative want to get in one last pitch here before we start deliberating? Okay, the public comment period is now ended, in time for commissioner deliberations. Does anyone have any follow-up questions or comments, or does anyone want to make a motion to approve? Commissioner Davies. You're on mute.
I'm curious whether or not city staff has made, or Hambro has made any estimation of the amount of otherwise recyclable products that are being diverted into the waste stream in the absence of a facility like this, which would maybe give us a sense of the impact on the waste stream by any delays associated with getting this project underway.
Seems like a good question for Hambro. While they're unmuting. Oh, go ahead.
Well, we feel that for the most part, the collectors are removing the material at their facilities, but there is a nominal amount that's passing through, and we have no idea how much that is. It's being collected in backyards and garages around the area.
We have people from Humboldt County driving Crescent City to redeem up here now. So, and that started clear back April when we have to back up in May from the from COVID-19 in 2020, and we've had a continually run of people coming up from Humboldt to redeem here, and they would love to stay home. Everyday stories of buildup of CRV material. I think any more delays, I think we're just going to cause other problems with litter and potentially, people were fighting the last chance grade, but still we're going through the closures and stuff and bringing it up here to get their nickel back. That's what we're trying to do, is get down there and give those Humboldt County residents a chance. Thank you.
Any other comments from commissioners? Do we have a motion to approve?
I'd like to make a comment, Julie. This just looks like an excellent project and a great location for it. I appreciate the city's details, and the sensitivity to the marsh is probably the biggest concern that I would have too. But if noise is going to be mitigated properly, I can't see any other reason why this project isn't well suited for that location, and something we obviously need in the community. I have a personal friend that drove all the way to Crescent City last Friday, and I just couldn't believe he was driving up there for his redemption fees, but that was his only choice. So it just seems like it's overdue. The community is ready for it. And I'd like to make a motion to approve if we're there.
We have a motion from Commissioner Tagney. Do we have a second?
I'd like to second the motion from Commissioner Tagney, and just also add that there's already a lot of businesses around the marsh that generate a really incredible amount of noise, especially right when you cross L Street, across Samoa on L, and walk into the marsh that way. That building is very loud. I'm equally enthusiastic and would like to second that motion.
Great, we have a motion and a second. Can we get a roll call, please?
Commissioner Tagney,
Yay.
Commissioner Davies,
Yay.
Commissioner Barstow,
Aye.
Commissioner Figueroa,
Aye.
Vice Chair Mayor,
Aye.
and Chair Desade Alcock.
Aye, motion approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Likewise.
All right,
Thank
so
you.
you're welcome. Thank you. Okay, so we have a second public hearing, and this is the proposed parcel merger and design review permit for the Colwell parcel at 2270 Western Avenue. Before we begin this public hearing, do any commissioners have an ex parte communications to disclose? Okay, can we get a staff report, please?
Yes, can I have
Yep.
the PowerPoint presentation be brought up, please?
Yeah, absolutely. And Joe, before you jump into that, I did want to start with a few words. But before we start the staff report, if you are associated with this project, if you could please press the raise hand function so that you pop to the top and I don't have to hunt and peck for you, I'd appreciate that. So before you tonight, commissioners, is a proposed parcel merger and design review. Joe's going to go into the details, but I just wanted to give a little bit of a background on the project. It's a little unusual, the recommendation we're making tonight, so I wanted to make sure that you understood that and had a chance to ask any questions about that before we dive into the detail. And then again, I know we have a couple of other agenda items tonight, so we're going to try and be brief in our presentation. I know that the applicant has a presentation that they wish to make. And also, as I'd mentioned, Joe has prepared some remarks as well. So before you tonight, the design review action is really centered around a use that largely hinges on the subordinate and incidental use of the property and sort of weighing the findings for that. Staff is coming forward with a recommendation for approval pending the outcome of the commission's discussion and deliberations, assuming that they can make those findings. We did ask the applicant to prepare some findings for your review, which I believe you've received in advance, but not in connection with the packet. We emailed those to you. And Joe, correct me if I'm wrong on that.
I'm not aware of any findings. I think they're going to present the findings.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm wrong on that. Thank you for that. So you'll be presented with findings tonight. And so the findings that we provided in the staff report really are sort of the bare bones. And we're asking the commission to make the decision that they can make the findings or cannot make the findings, and then moving forward from there, approving the project based on the conditions of approval that were prepared. So are there any, this is a little odd. Are there any questions about sort of the format of this particular public hearing item before we get started? Vice Chair Mayor?
Yeah, in the staff report, there were a number of questions which asked the commission to say yes, no, or this is better than that, and it was all sort of broken down into sections, which I gather relate directly to the findings that would be necessary for approval. By going through piece by piece, it does give the impression that if there's a yes answer or a possible option that would work for each one of those questions, there's no way that the commission could fail to make those findings. Was that your intention in structuring the staff report that way?
I'll let Joe speak to that, but yeah, I believe that was the intention, is to really hone in on the specific questions that you need to answer in order to be able to make the findings. And so in the discussions with the applicant bringing this project forward, we really tried to thread the needle. There were some miscommunications early on in terms of what the staff would be able to fully support. But at this point, they've made a proposal that I think is worth the commission taking a look at and having the discussion. And because the applicant is preparing the findings for your review and approval, I would recommend that before, after Joe gives his staff report, that you allow the applicant to provide their pitch for the findings and their presentation before you go into any kind of questions or deliberations on those points. Sound fair? Okay. So without further ado, I will turn this over to my colleague Joe Mateer, and he has a PowerPoint presentation for you.
Yes, good evening. This is the second public hearing before you. Tonight we have a parcel merger and a design review application at 2270 Western Avenue in Arcata. Next slide, please. The blue circle is the address of where the location is. The city did issue a demolition permit already, and it's my understanding that the structure is being deconstructed by the property owner now. It's that section of Western is a two-way road. The southern portion of Western from Sunset to Foster is a one-way going south there. North would be two-way. North Street is two-way up above. The property owner does live adjacent next door on the corner of North and Western. And they recently, this property came up. There was an existing house on it, small home, and they went ahead and purchased the property so they had more control over the property itself. Next slide, please. The first action that we're asking the Planning Commission to take is a parcel merger, and that is found in Attachment A. The Attachment A does have embedded in it the findings of approval, including the environmental review, CEQA exemption, conditions of approval, and they're based on the project description and plans that you'll find in Attachment B. Can I get the next slide, please? This is a Assessor Parcel Map, and it shows the assessor parcel number 14 that's highlighted in red. And you'll see that there's two different numbers, the 24 and 26, and those are the lot numbers. So it's the one assessor parcel number is made up of two separate legal lots. And there, right now, the existing structure that's being deconstructed is located over that property line. So there's a number of nonconformities that is taking place with the existing structure, one being setbacks. If you look in the lower right corner of this same plat, you'll see there's a number of assessor parcel numbers that are reconfigured. And that was a similar situation where there's a number of parcels that were made up of 25-foot wide lots, and the property owner went ahead and reconfigured them into more usable spaces at this point. I know the applicant had asked at one time, could they merge the property outright with their adjacent parcel? And at that time, you know, our staff was recommending not to do that. We weren't sure we'd be able to make the findings of approval. There is a little bit of a unique, unusual shape to it by having the L-shaped portion of that and the loss of residential potential on the property as well. But our staff is making a recommendation to approve this one, the parcel merger, by adopting the action that you'll find in Attachment A. Next slide, please. So as far as the design review, we have a building permit was submitted for review and approval. Design review is typically in this area of town done administratively through the building permit process. When we received the application, we determined that their design review is required because the accessory structure is taller than the primary purpose and dwelling unit on the property, as well as there was a question about, as David mentioned, incidental and subordination. Typically, the primary use of the property would be the residential structure, and anything accessory would be incidental and subordinate to that. Our staff report does provide that code section in the land use code, and there is some other language there about that. So as the director indicated, we kind of left this open-ended so that the Planning Commission could deliberate the project, hear public testimony, and consider the project for approval, or if they can't make the findings, denial of the project. So there would be some work that we have to do to craft the specific findings of approval, and then if there's any unique conditions of approval that may support those findings of approval as well. The application material is found in Exhibit 3 of Attachment B. The next slide. So some of the findings of approval, we look at the architectural design, mass, and scale. This is an abridged finding here. I mean, there's much more detail in the staff report. The accessory structure is, 1,440 feet, 1,440 square feet, whereas the residence, I think, is like 384. So it's substantially smaller. It is taller as well. Is it truly incidental and subordinate? Is it compatible with the neighborhood? There are definitely some large structures in there, but I don't really understand if there's any of the large accessory structures. Could it be that I believe that the design and the applicant can speak to that, is that they intended to have the accessory structure, the shop garage, kind of look like a residential structure, and that most public members passing by won't know that it is a garage and shop there. So part of the findings is the building arrangement. That would be, how the two structures work together, and then the exterior appearance. And the staff report does identify some of those items there. Mentioned the high windows up on the garage and shed. That's a part of the function of the structure itself. It allows more storage space inside and security for that structure. And then the back door on the east elevation has a large roll-up door. In the staff report, we do identify there is a minimum maximum parking code requirements, and it does require a minor use permit if you exceed the parking requirements. And for a single family residential development, it is 2 independently accessible parking spaces. And that would be something that the commission may weigh into. And I did put on this slide here other code exceptions, and there is built into our project or our land use code is the ability to deviate and obtain exceptions to a lot of the standards that are found in the land use code. Could be setbacks, building heights, and you might be able to use this to support some of the findings of approval when you're looking at the accessory structure and the relationship with the primary dwelling unit. Next slide, please. The recommendations, conditions of approval, I just put here that, if there's any ones that you find necessary and appropriate for that, we do include some of our standard conditions of approval in the exhibit 2 of your planning commission packet. My next slides are, I have the site plan, I have the building elevations, and this is kind of a floor plan as well. I don't know if we really need to go through those. I think that for trying to save time, if the planning commission has any questions, we can try to delve into those. I do know that the applicant and agent are prepared to do a presentation as well. I did receive some public comments on this, and they were included in your packet. And just this evening, I received another one by the email, and points out somebody who's lived on the property or in the area for a long time, for over 20 years. They've noticed many changes, some good, bad. They have concerns about the magnitude of the project. Size of the garage is huge, not fitting into the format of the lot lines. Most people park cars on or adjoining the street or alley. The idea of a driveway going to the center of the lot seems excessive. Secondly, the neighborhood has already suffered growing pains. Parking is a problem, and people have taken upon themselves to park at any angle, thus blocking the flow of traffic and creating safety hazards for drivers and pedestrians, children, and pets. Thirdly, we already have many problems with people using large spaces in garage to house students or for business purposes. There have been an ongoing problem with permanent school buses, vans, and cars using the streets as camping area. Is this development going to be a business purpose, bringing more traffic, transient, and noise? So those were comments that were received just recently on this project. Staff would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for staff before we open this up to the public hearing? Okay. Commissioner Meyer?
Hi. Well, one of the things I'm wondering is, and maybe the applicant could clarify this, there was a long list of uses proposed for the garage workshop space. And one of them included restarting the casting business that the applicant had operated elsewhere. Would that and maybe staff could respond. Would something like that be considered a home occupation, which would have to, meet all those home occupation standards? Or would it be so incidental that we don't need to think about it here? And I guess second, and this would be a question for staff, given the number of accessory buildings, whether they're garages or sheds or whatever, in that neighborhood that are being used for all kinds of things other than housing, I'm wondering what potential rethinks of the zoning rules for that particular zoning category would encompass. I know that there's a push for live work spaces, and I think that in figuring out what to do about this proposal, it would help to know if there are any more general changes in that type of zoning that are already in the works in your minds. So, questions.
Regarding I'll take, if it's okay with the director, I'll take the home occupation, but David, if you want to address the live work question, that'd be okay. I can handle that if you want. But the home occupation, I had discussions with the applicants about this, and I did point that out that in some of the presentation material that they do indicate they might do this casting. It's a well, they can explain it better, but I think they do an art form that would be considered a home occupation if there are incomes being generated from that, and they would have to meet those. And there is obviously, home occupation is generally intended to be serving the residents that live there. You can't have the employees. Again, there's a minor use permit to deviate from some of those standards. But my understanding is at this point, the application, and the owner can address that, is that they're not going to include that activity in their project at this point. So it was left out of the staff report intentionally. And then as far as the live work, Director Loya?
Yeah, I mean, I think specifically the live work standards that we have adopted into our code right now are too restrictive, and have kind of led me to proclaim that live work is dead. But I do think that it takes that it bears further consideration. I think it's certainly something that we could look at as we go through the general plan amendments that we're looking forward to over the course of the next year. Do we want to expand those, make those a little more flexible? Are there ways to encourage these kinds of uses? Certainly, the Gateway Area Plan is intended to be a mixed use zone. So we've already accepted as a community in the work that we've done to date, in any case, that mixed use is acceptable and may include even some light industrial type uses. So I certainly think that's a point for consideration in the near future. But nothing is afoot right now.
And the one point I was just going to check the code, because if I recall, most live work would be commercial uses allowing a residential aspect of it. And so what we're looking at here would be a reverse of that.
Are there any other questions before we? Okay, if there are no more questions, let's open this to public comment. Would the applicant like to be the first to comment?
Hello, yes. Mic check first. Are we live? Great. Thank you, commissioners and city staff. My name is Glenn Caldwell. I'm here with my wife, Lori.
Good evening.
Thank you for the opportunity to bring our project before you tonight. Lori and I are a retired couple who hope to build a garage on property we own on a parcel next door to our home on Western Avenue. We bought our home on the corner of Western and North Street in 1985. During this discussion, I'll be referring to pages and photos in the 10-page PDF document titled Applicant Presents that you've been provided. I think, David, you're in charge of that, I guess.
Yeah, and would you like me to share it?
As I go through it, I'm hoping you can. I'll be referencing page numbers. Thanks. We are both HSU grads. We left Arcata in 1988 to pursue careers, renting out our property for 30 years. We returned to Arcata in 2017 to make Arcata our permanent home. We love Arcata and our neighborhood and appreciate the challenges the city is facing. We are not developers. We are not land speculators. We don't have deep pockets. We're not trying to make a profit on this project. We are long-term residents who intend to spend the rest of our lives in Arcata, in this neighborhood, and are highly motivated to make our neighborhood a better place. So a garage is not physically possible on the lot where our house is located. For views of the property, please see page 4 of the PDF doc. And so in this image, you can see that we have no room due to a legally permitted ADU that's already present on the property when we bought our home. Currently, everything that one would normally store in a garage is jammed into a downstairs bedroom in our house that we expect to need later as we age in place. Because I perform all of our vehicle, property, landscape maintenance, I am currently storing building materials, auto parts, chainsaws, gardening and landscaping equipment, paints and power tools in this bedroom in our house. Because I kayak, fish, and crab, I also store kayak gear, fishing and crabbing equipment, bait, and art supplies in this bedroom. Anytime I need to perform maintenance on equipment or vehicle, or work on a project of any type, I have to do it outside, hence our strong motivation for a garage. We began our discussion of this project with the city over 1.5 years ago, prior to closing on the purchase of this property. As Joe mentioned, we discussed a partial merger of the 2 lots with the city as a path forward to building a garage, but were discouraged from that path and advised that building a garage would be feasible if we incorporated housing onto our project. Thus, we added an efficiency dwelling unit onto the street-facing elevation of the building, designing it to look like the surrounding 1940s era housing in our neighborhood. We were also told our project might be approved if it appeared residential from the street. And while this is a subjective goal, we believe we've done that. Our initial design has been improved to have the look and feel of a residence. And in your info packet, we have west elevation options 1 and 2. And that's also on the intro page of the PDF doc, which I think, yeah, if you could screen back to the first page of the doc, would be there. So yeah, those 2, we have a couple of different window arrangements. That's basically, we think that this does look like a residence, and this is the primary street facing view from Western Avenue. So 2 months ago, we were informed that we could only build on the parcel if we merged the 2 20-foot wide subparcels on the lot, and we're before you tonight hoping to do that. Last week, we were told our project might be approvable if we could demonstrate that a future owner could remodel the building into a 1,200 square foot residence. We provided a draft remodel plan included in your packet, and that is on the last 2 pages, pages 9 and 10 of the PDF doc. And we believe that we can demonstrate that this criteria is easily met. On this page, you can see that a future 16 by 16 bedroom or living expansion area is totally feasible within the property line setbacks. And on page 2, the last page, page 10 there, you can see that this is the garage space, and we're proposing that a future 14 by 40 living area could be developed within the insulated garage envelope, also within the setbacks, and that would allow a remaining functional garage space of 22 by 40 feet there. And all that would require essentially is a partition. Okay. Essentially, the insulated and finished interior of the garage is a blank slate for a future owner. We intend to use this property for our lifetimes, which I'm hoping is 30 years. After that, it will pass to another owner. We're using high quality building products, building materials on this product. I'm hoping this building has a lifespan of 200 years or greater. So we've made every good faith effort to meet every objective the city's indicated while trying to maintain our own objectives for the project. We've incorporated design elements that are echoed from other adjacent and nearby properties in the Sunset neighborhood. To ensure that our neighbors, those most affected by this project, are okay with our property and to answer their questions, the weekend after Thanksgiving, I walked our neighborhood, specifically Western Avenue, North Street, Eastern Avenue, and Grant, meeting with 26 neighbors who read the project description, the same description that was written by the city for the public notice. The neighbors viewed our project elevations and signed their names in favor of our project. These signatures are included on pages 91 through 98 of your packet. In summary, our proposed project is a very low traffic, low impact use in a very dense mixed use neighborhood that includes a similar RL1 zoned live work building on the corner of Western and Sunset, which is 325 feet away from our site. And I have a photo of that building on page 3 of the PDF. One more, I think. Yeah, there it is. So that's the building. That's a complex that's on the corner of Sunset and Western. There's a workshop there. There's residences there. There's a large garden area. It's kind of an eclectic and unique group of buildings, and it adds to the neighborhood. Our immediate area includes many multifamily apartments and ADUs and a commercially zoned parcel located only 120 feet to the west of our project on Alliance Avenue. I've included street views of our neighborhood in photos on page 7 of the PDF doc. And you can see in this photo that, yes, there are buses parked on the street. And I, just as a side commentary, I find it ironic that, our neighbors can park Burning Man buses on the street, but we have to highly explain that we want to park vehicles on our private property. The street is impacted with parking. We feel that we're helping those impacts. This is a dense neighborhood. So it will be only my wife and I and a tenant accessing and using the rear portion of the property and the garage. The building is located toward the front of the parcel closest to Western Avenue so as to preserve open sun exposed areas on the lot for raised vegetable beds and fruit trees. The city has tasked us with providing justification for findings 1 through 6 in the project staff report. As I address the findings, I'll again be referring to the 10-page PDF doc here as I go through each of the findings. So finding number 1, providing architectural design, building height, massing, and scale that is compatible with other structures on the site and in the immediate neighborhood. Based on the following, we believe the Planning Commission can find the proposed development architecture, scale, and massing are compatible with the neighborhood. On pages 1 through 4 of the PDF, we're showing neighborhood images, nearby building heights on this page in particular. So yeah, there's a couple of very tall buildings that have been added to the neighborhood. And we're also showing, the architectural styles in the neighborhood. Our design is compatible with our neighborhood, echoing architectural details and heights of adjacent and surrounding homes. The residential component of our project faces the street frontage with subordinate garage to the rear, providing off-street parking. All mature landscaping on the site will be retained, acting as a visual screen from the public right-of-way. Finding number 2, providing attractive and desirable site layout and design, building arrangement, exterior appearance and setbacks, accessory structures, landscaping, outdoor lighting, and signs. We believe the Planning Commission can find the proposed foundation, this is an issue that Joe brought up, does not increase the bulk and mass of the accessory garage in relationship to the dwelling. The foundation accommodates the lot elevation change of 23 inches over the 36-foot length of the garage and will be set back 26 feet from Western Avenue. It is not visible from the public right-of-way because of a new solid wood fencing on both sides of the parcel. Regarding windows, we believe the Planning Commission can find that the placement and style of windows are an attractive and desirable exterior appearance for the neighborhood. Window heights are designed to provide good interior all natural task lighting and line of sight privacy for neighboring properties, as well as being a security feature. And the window views are on the project plans, which are in your packet. We believe the Planning Commission can find that the garage roll-up door on the east wall is an attractive and desirable exterior appearance for the neighborhood. As a feature facing a low traffic alley, which provides access to numerous similar neighborhood carports and garage structures, the roll door is in keeping with the existing visual component of the neighborhood. Garage and parking are subordinate by being placed to the rear of the property. The project exterior architectural design features and appearances are echoed by our own home next door and neighboring homes. The project retains all mature landscaping. All exterior lighting will be compliant with California standards. Finding number 3, providing efficient and safe public access, circulation, and parking. Please refer to pages 4 and 7 of the PDF doc. One more. Four, yeah.
Four.
Yeah, 4 and 7. We're getting there. Here we go. Okay, so on the bottom view, this image, you can see typical street parking. That's a typical street parking scene there. You can see all the cars lined up on the street. We believe the Planning Commission find the project does not exceed the maximum number of independently accessible parking spaces on our project site. This project design addresses the neighborhood's immediate and ongoing need to minimize on-street parking due to a very high level of infill and existing ADUs, with more ADUs currently under construction on Western Avenue. The garage allows for safe off-street parking of boats and other equipment that would normally utilize much needed on-street parking spaces. We believe the Planning Commission can find that the proposed project does provide safe access, circulation, and parking. By utilizing the alley for safe access, we are improving the overall circulation in the neighborhood and ensuring that no vehicles drive over sidewalk curbs to park. Finding number 4, providing appropriate open space and landscaping, including the use of water efficient landscaping. We believe the Planning Commission can find the project provides appropriate open space and landscaping. The building placement on the parcel provides for adequate open space for water efficient landscaping and gardening, and maximizes good use of good sun exposed areas for vegetable gardening and fruit trees. Finding number 5, showing consistency with the general plan, local coastal program, and any applicable specific plan. We believe the Planning Commission can find a project consistent with the general plan, residential land use policies based on findings 1 through 4 above. The project requires no exceptions to building codes consistent with the general plan, nor exceptions to zoning standards, setbacks, building heights, circulation, coverage, or parking. The project is consistent in meeting all requirements of the general plan, as no specific ratio requirements are codified between primary and subordinate uses under RL1 zoning. To repeat, no specific ratio requirements are codified between primary and subordinate uses under RL1 zoning. Finding 6, complying with any applicable design guidelines or design review policies. Based on the findings of 1 through 5 above, we believe the Planning Commission can find the project does comply with the applicable design policies. Environmental review is the last item, and I believe the city's determined the project is not subject to CEQA. So in closing, we believe our project is conducive for approval for the following reasons. The project design has been approved to have the look and feel of a residence. 26 neighbors have signed an approval of our project. Our project provides efficient and safe access, circulation, and parking in a dense, traffic-impacted neighborhood. It provides an affordable, safe, energy-efficient, one-bedroom efficiency rental dwelling for members of our community. The design readily accommodates future residential expansion. We believe our project is checking many of the boxes that are the city's priorities: an attractive design, use of quality construction materials, a highly energy efficient building, diversification of construction and housing styles, a potential live workspace for a future owner, minimizing the need for a car, all electric use, enhance property values for our neighborhood. Sadly, another driving factor of our need for a garage is an increase in local property crimes on our street and in the city of Arcata. The October 26th edition of the Mad River Union featured a half-page piece by Sheriff William Hansel discussing the percentage increase in property crimes in the county over the last 2 years. Within the last year on Western Avenue, our neighbor across the street has his vehicle stolen while parked in front of his house. Another neighbor 3 houses away had a motorcycle stolen from his carport on the alley. In September, another neighbor parked their car in front of our house and had their windows smashed and items stolen. 2 cars on North Street have had their tires slashed. We have met with Arcata's police chief, Brian Ahern, and understand that due to staffing and recruitment problems, it is incumbent upon us to protect our property, and we believe this project will allow us to do that. Currently, when parked on the street, I place this sign inside my vehicle with the glove box open and all valuables removed. The sign says, "No valuables left in vehicle." Lastly, sorry. Lastly, Laura and I would like to acknowledge and thank city staff for their help on this project. We greatly appreciate the collaborative efforts of redevelopment director David Loya and senior planner Joe Mateer, and the time they have spent helping us understand the city's objectives and planning guidelines. We also appreciate being able to bring this project before the Planning Commission and for the commissioners' time as well. Concluding my presentation, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any members of the public who'd like to comment on this item?
There are, and I did just want to clarify based on the early oral communication that we received that the agenda does say that if you speak, you will have 3 minutes to comment, subject to the mayor's discretion. And in that case, it means the chair's discretion. This is a boilerplate template from the council's agendas. And so the commenter did ask for 3 minutes instead of 2. You had mentioned that you would be accepting 2, I think anticipating additional public comment. So I just wanted to clarify that before we start taking additional public comment.
Do any of the commissioners object to giving 3 minutes? No, okay, 3 minutes. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Colin, feel free.
Thank you. Good evening. This is Colin Fisk with CRTP, the Coalition for Responsible Transportation Priorities. CRTP has over 600 members and supporters, many of them in the city of Arcata, but I have to admit I also have something of a personal interest in this item since it is in the neighborhood where I live. That said, there is, as you all know, a housing crisis and a climate crisis. We really just don't support reducing the amount of housing in a core area of the city while overbuilding storage for vehicles. The applicant is proposing to reduce the existing residential square footage by more than half and build a garage that's almost 4 times larger than the new home. I know a lot of ideas have been floated about what might happen in that garage, but by definition, a garage is for vehicles, and this is just excessive vehicle storage. Particularly given that that same space could be used to produce more much needed housing for people. The required number of parking spaces under the code for a single family home is 1, and the maximum number allowed is 2. If you look at the required dimensions of various kinds of parking spaces in the city code, you could calculate somewhere between 4 and 8 spaces provided in a garage this size. That would be between 4 and 8 times the required number, between 2 and 4 times the maximum. And city code, as mentioned, explicitly discourages providing more parking than is required. So at a time when the city is working hard to reduce its car dependence and increase its housing, this just does not seem like the right kind of a project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and we do have one other caller. Go ahead, 2767.
you're on mute, caller.
I believe if you push *9, that will unmute. I'm sorry, *9,
Can you
*6.
can you hear me now?
Yep. Yes.
This is Sarah Atkins. I'm working with the Caldwells on the design for their house, and I guess I'm really here for any technical questions. I would want to point out that, as you can see, it's a very personal project for Glenn and Lori. They spent a tremendous amount of time and attention to detail on their design. I think that a lot of the problems in the neighborhood that they're talking about, crime, parking, this is resolving that. Outside of, whether it's an aesthetic issue, we're resolving problems that are existing. As far as the parking space, it is still a 2-car garage, regardless of the size. It has it's a single door, so we're not going to be parking 4 to 8 cars in there. But I would also like to point out that a garage, as most of us know, is more for storage than parking, as far as vehicles. So I think it's a need. It's a very personal need, and I wouldn't want to rule it out for the owner's behalf. If there's any technical questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. But I think they made a pretty thorough, complete presentation to the commission.
Thank you, Sarah. Are there any other callers?
There are none.
There are none. Okay. Does the applicant want the last word? Do you have anything else you'd like to say?
Hi, thanks, Chair Besaid. Yes, yeah, as Sarah pointed out, and to address the comments of the transportation person that called in, I think he is my neighbor. We've talked. He's down the road from me, I think, on Grant. Yeah, so Colin, I think, just to address the issue in general of what this building's function would be, I think it is limited thinking to think that this type of building is only for vehicles. In our case, it's not. We do have one vehicle we're hoping to store in there. It is an antique vehicle that we purchased in 1985 in Humboldt County that we've restored. It's currently outside, rusting in the weather and degrading. We hope to protect it. We hope to also be able to store a sailboat in that building, a small sailboat on a trailer. We have kayaks, we have fishing equipment, we have crabbing gear. This is really a protected space for projects, my own projects, not commercial projects. We're not looking to start a business. We're retired. We really, frankly, just need space for living. We can't do this project on our existing parcel. We don't have room for it. And we feel like we've tried to address the objectives of the city to the degree that we can, while still keeping this project, to a degree that would suit our needs. Our need for this doesn't include building a 2,000 square foot residence. We don't want to do that. We understand the city has a need for housing. We're trying to incorporate housing into this project, and the project is suitable for later expansion into additional residences. We're retired. We're willing to be landlords. We've done that before. We're good landlords. We keep our property in tip-top condition because I believe that's my responsibility as a landlord, to provide, a safe and up to spec living condition for a tenant. But it's not our primary motivation. So I hope that we can come to an agreement on this. We really have put a lot of thought and effort into this design. There are problems in this neighborhood. There's problems in the city, problems in the county. The crime, that we're all experiencing is problematic. The police chief has told us it's up to us to protect ourselves because they really can't. And I get that. And I'm hoping that changes. But in the meantime, here we are. Here we all are. I'm trying to get vehicles off the street to ameliorate those problems. There are social design, social engineering issues going on here. I completely agree with eliminating the use of automobiles in town and minimizing that. But at the same time, the city is increasing the use of ADUs in my neighborhood, which brings in more people and brings in more vehicles. So these two things are in a little bit of a conflict. I think eventually they'll work themselves out. But for the next 10, 20 years, you're going to have people that aren't giving up their cars yet. These streets are going to be very impacted. We're trying to address that problem. Yeah, a garage is for more than parking vehicles in.
Hobbies.
So I think that's all I have to say. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So the public comment period is now closed and it's time for commissioners' deliberation. So there are a lot of moving parts with this, commissioners. So I'm proposing maybe each of you saying what findings that you have issues with and see if maybe we can work those issues and reach a decision. Does that sound like a good plan? So who wants to start? At the top of my screen, I see Commissioner Tagney. Do we want to start with you?
Sure. I have no problems with any of the findings. I see the built-in conflict by code, but by circumstance of how this project's laying out, what it looks like from the street, that it's being designed to incorporate any future residential expansion, which seems very likely at some point down the road. Seems like it's really kind of the win-win. If somebody wanted to build a 5,000 square foot house up on the top of Diamond Drive for 2 people, there's no code that would prevent them and require them to house more people. But if Mr. Caldwell wanted to call this huge space dance studio or his yoga room or something else, maybe it wouldn't bring up this issue about cars. I see this couple as project people that are going to really enjoy this space for lots of purposes beyond anything to do with automobiles. And I just have no problem with it. There's a lot of other projects in the neighborhood that are as tall, as big, as massive, multiple family dwellings, all kinds of different things. I just don't see this as, well, and that this one is just so thoughtfully designed. It feels like it really threads the needle that they're being asked to do. I feel like they've really stepped up. So I have no problem with any of the findings. Thank you for asking, and thanks for the great presentation from the applicant.
Thank you. Commissioner Figueroa, do you have some comments?
I don't have any objections to what has been proposed by the city staff in regards of their findings. I think it's a great project for these individuals starting their second life in retirement. So I'm in support of it, and I think it's a good opportunity for them to, to beautify their block and their corner. And I think it does address needs in regards of providing some sort of housing and the future potential and the plan of expansion if necessary. That's still an option on the table. So I don't really have any issues with this.
Thank you. Commissioner Mayer.
Yeah, this is actually a difficult one because if you look at the letter of what we need to find in order to approve this, it just sort of barely comes in there. And so I probably wouldn't be able to say that I couldn't make all of the necessary findings. And yet some of them just barely with regard to things like the massing and the subsidiary use versus the major use. And so not approving this would really seem to be adhering to an overly rigid interpretation of our rules, and yet it's a pretty troubling precedent to me, especially considering that although the Colwells now are seeing this as, you know, their next door garage and their next door rental home, at some point these lots, which I do approve being merged, their house and the newly merged lot, could and probably will be owned separately. In which case you have this question of the size and massing again. I found that the notes from the neighbors, in which I think only one person really objected to the house, actually were pretty convincing. If the issue is compatibility with the neighborhood and neighboring properties, it seems like, you know, you actually did go and ask the neighbors, does this seem compatible? And they seem to say yes, with a few exceptions. And the point that, you know, if you called it something other than a garage, you know, the issue with the vehicle storage and how many parking spaces do you actually have, then belies the question of, do you have too much vehicle parking? And so I think that kind of reluctantly, I probably could make all of those findings for approval, and yet with a certain level of discomfort, because it does kind of skirt under the letter of those rules while flying in the face of some of their intentions. So.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Davies, do you have some comments, or what issues do you have?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the previous comments by the other commissioners. I appreciate that this project in some ways isn't perfect, but I think I support this project. I think it's going to be an improvement for the neighborhood. I took a look around the neighborhood, and I think they're checking enough boxes and are earnest in their intentions with this project. I'm in full support.
Thank you. Commissioner Barstow?
Yeah, I support the findings. I just want to say that the design is very nicely done, and it's for considering that you have a relatively large garage shop area. It's not really noticeable from the street. The only thing that troubles me is the large roll-up door, and I'm assuming that was done because it's needed for getting a sailboat into the storage area. I just had a couple thoughts. I'd recommend that when you actually build this, that you plan ahead for the possible later conversion to housing. You might want to include extra electrical. You might want to frame in the openings for required egress windows, for example, even though you'd have it covered over with siding, just to make things easier later on. My other thought is about the parking. Whoever lives in the front unit probably is going to park on the street. Even if you provided parking in the back somehow for one or two cars, the tendency would be to park on the street. And I hope that the owners are intending to park their cars in the back there, although it doesn't seem entirely practical in terms of having two cars just becomes a kind of a logistics problem if you have a couple cars parked there and getting one in and one out and so on. You might want to revisit the layout of the driveway and the pad for the garage door and so on, so that you can be sure that it's easy to get your cars in and out. Otherwise, I support the project. I'm kind of envious. It'd be so nice to have that kind of shop area. So anyhow, so I just say good luck to you.
Great, thank you. I agree with what everyone said, especially Commissioner Barstow. I think that was really good advice. I do think this project is compatible with the other structures. I walk that neighborhood a lot with my dog, and I really like that neighborhood. People are really friendly, and there are different sizes of houses. There's half story, 1.5, 2-story. It's kind of all over, so it really is compatible. I don't think that having the primary unit so much smaller than the accessory really is consistent with the general plan. But however, what Commissioner Tagney said, I mean, you can build a huge house, and if there's just one person in it, or if you use it for storage, what's the difference? And as long as this house can be converted at some point to residence, I think we're good. So I agree. I'm ready to approve this project. I'm just waiting for someone to make a motion.
I'll move to approve this project.
We have a first by Commissioner Davies. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
We have a second by Commissioner Figueroa. Do we have a roll call, please?
Davies?
Aye.
Figueroa?
Aye.
Barstow?
Aye.
Tagney?
Aye.
Vice Chair Mayor?
Aye.
And Chair Vasade Alcock.
Aye, motion approved. Congratulations.
Thank you, commissioners. We really appreciate it.
Of course.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Have a nice evening. Thank you.
I'm going to
Okay,
second. I was just going to say, I'm going to second Commissioner Barstow's. I'm a little jealous of that shop too.
Yeah.
I'll third that.
Okay, so we have a third business item, a little out of order here. Our third business item is to consider resolution PC 21-8, amending the housing for homeless in combining zone. Do we have a staff report, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Vasade Alcock. I will keep this brief and leave it to questions from the Commission and the public to guide any follow-up that needs to be done to clarify. But we are asking for the Planning Commission to adopt Resolution PC 2108, which would make a recommendation to the City Council that they adopt an ordinance amending the city's land use code regarding its housing for homeless combining zone. I'll share with you and the public quickly the amendments that ordinance would make. Under section 9.28110 of the land use code, we'd be amending in one new figure, which would describe the existing housing for homeless overlay and the added figure indicating the addition of 2 properties that are on Valley West Boulevard. One that has 2 parcels associated with it, associated with the Red Roof Inn, and one with 1 parcel associated with the Days Inn. Further adding to the 942-200, which is the specific regulations related to the housing for homeless overlay zone, we would be adding, again, reference to that new figure, 2-23.2, and then some clarification that 2-3.2 would only allow for permanent supportive housing. So the housing for homeless overlay zone would allow, in general, allows for transitional shelters, it allows for emergency shelters, and it allows for permanent supportive housing. So this language clarifies that those parcels that are being added on Valley West could only be used for permanent supportive housing. There are some other clarifications to identify the standards that are associated with transitional and emergency shelters versus permanent supportive housing, because they're completely different housing types and they have completely different models of how they're operated. So your adoption of PC 2108 would make that recommendation to the City Council that they adopt those. This recommendation would be going to the Planning Commission, to the City Council tomorrow night at their regularly scheduled meeting, where they're considering approving applications with Arcata House Partnership and Danco for two separate projects, one on each of these two properties, for the for the project Home Key money from the state that would convert these hotels to permanent supportive housing units, at which folks that are currently homeless or at risk of homelessness could find secure, safe shelter that was provided for with supportive services. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have about this fairly simple amendment to the combining zones, or open it up to public comment.
Do we have any questions? Oh, Commissioner Tagney?
Yeah, I'm a little confused here. Perhaps this is obvious, but us passing this resolution, does it say that these projects then will move forward after they go through council? Or is this just a preliminary step to do the combining zone?
No, that's a really good question. The projects that are being applied for at the council, or that are being applied for with the state that the council will be considering tomorrow, cannot go forward without this amendment. But just because this amendment happens doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to go forward. There are lots of other steps that need to happen, including securing the full funding for each project independently.
And if we support the combining zone amendment, but have questions about how this project would play out if the council approves it, is this our opportunity, our single opportunity to ask those detailed questions?
You could certainly ask questions about the projects at this time. They're, I guess, connected to the proposal, in that that's what's motivating this, but they're unconnected to the Planning Commission's decision-making rubric. But certainly happy to answer questions about them. All right. And they may, I guess, there may be a tenuous connection to the the uses and findings that the Planning Commission would need to make.
Okay, and this project, if it goes through council and is supported, won't necessarily ever come back to us. Is that true?
That is true. It would not. So this would make it such that permanent supportive housing, whether provided for through the Project Home Key grant, or if it was provided by some other funding source, would be principally permitted use on these two sites, regardless.
So if we have concerns, if I have concerns about, what this is really going to look like, what housing population is going to be able to get occupancy there, just, I don't know, any of these detailed questions, this isn't really the format for that, you're saying. Really, we're just talking about the findings for the combining zone.
That's correct, except to the extent that you could make a nexus between those findings and these projects as proposed. I suppose there may be a connection there. I haven't really thought too deeply about that, but maybe the deliberations will help elucidate some connections.
Okay, I'll that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Anyone else before we open? Do we have any members of the public that would like to comment?
If you'd like to comment on this, please raise your hand. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, hello. Thanks for allowing me to comment on this. I have property in, first, I'm sorry, I'm Kevin McKinney, local developer, engineer in Eureka. I have property there in Gintoli Lane, or off of Gintoli Lane on Valley West Boulevard. and I'm next door to the Days Inn there. I have a tremendous problem there with homeless folks. But I do want to start by saying that I had a quick conversation with David Loya on this, and I think that he's doing a tremendous job for the city of Arcata and being ahead of this homeless issue. And it is based on a real need. And to be able to do this and to harness these Project Home Key funds, my hat's off to him. He's ahead of it. He's trying to do something. It's not necessarily good for the people in that area, but I think they're trying to do what they can do. There is a problem in that area, and I think that this is going to change that area drastically. There's going the idea of the housing aspect of it is going to exacerbate the original and existing problem. And by that, I mean, when you read in there, in the question and answer aspect of this, are you going to keep them in at night? Well, we can't do that, which I understand you can't do that. And then they're going to be down on my property down because it's down in a lower area doing whatever kind of drugs they do. And they're messed up. It's difficult for these people. The police told me to back off for the pandemic, and I'm having to back off for the pandemic. We went in there and we took 6 truckloads of garbage out a year ago, and I imagine I probably have 10 or 12 truckloads of garbage there now. So my issue is, that's just the world we live in right now, and I the city of Arcata, I'm trying to go along with it on that part, but. What I will say is, with regard to the planning aspect of this, I would like to request that there is a condition of approval that there is a fence between my property and Days Inn constructed that is maintained in perpetuity, in a sense that they just go in and they cut right through the fence. But at some point, Days Inn has some property down there behind them, and they can just stay on the Days Inn property. I'd just like them off of my property. So my request is to say that there's a condition of approval to require a fence. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Kevin. Do we have anyone else that wants to address this?
I am not seeing any right now.
Okay, so I'll close.
And I guess
Should I close the public?
just in reference to that, sorry. I've been told I have a little bit of a delay on my side, so I apologize for that.
Okay.
Oh,
So
I'm
the
sorry.
public-
We do have
we
one
do have
other
somebody else? Good.
person who would like to speak. Okay. Go ahead, Carol.
Okay. I'm just my remarks are only about the staff report. All of the housing for the homeless combining zones are on the fringes of Arcata. Why aren't they in the city center? Why aren't you converting the Arcata hotel? The Home Key program was to convert hotels. Are there plans to put a permanent supportive housing units in the Arcata Gateway area? These type of units are being segregated into large areas on the fringe of the property. And this, the building design standards in the staff report say that the optimum size for homeless, and I don't know whether this is transitional or whatever, are 20 to 40 beds. And these are, I'm just talking about Zoom questions next. On page 133, the second question from the bottom of the page talks about, will this bring homeless to the area? And the answer to that, I don't know who put the answers, was the fact that they would, that it would be, might be from other jurisdictions, but it will not be a regional draw. I have talked about the Rio Del project, and the tenants are mainly from Eureka. I think it would be a good idea to talk to the continuum of care about this. Ask if the units are available today. What would be the breakdown of the tenants that would be put in there? How many of them would be present homeless living in Arcata? I tried to contact them, but they didn't get back to me. The second one is about on page 133 about the budget. And how this would affect the budget with the bed tax. And they said, the answer to that was that several units would be removed. There is going to be 2 motels, 138 units, which is about 1/3 of the motels in the Valley West area. That's a huge, that's quite a bit. And then I think you're going to need more policing. I'm going to put a substation out here, manned 24 hours a day. We need the help. With the proposed zoning change, what is to prevent the future conversion of these units to emergency shelters and transient housing? As I said in my letter, my husband and I were told that the hotels would not be converted to SROs. From what I understand, tenants can't use, buy, or sell drugs on the property. According to the number of parking spaces required is 1 for every 10 beds. They won't have cars either. So they will be buying and selling drugs in other parts of Valley West. And according to the packet page, the Zoom answer, tenancy can't be tied to behavior off the premises, unquote. No staff from the premises from the conversions would be helpful to us for behavior off the premises. The Carlson Park is already a problem and really not usable by the general public. If this project is allowed to be built, the rest of Valley West may be unusable by the public as well. And I sped up my comments. So do you have any questions for me about the comments I made now or about my letter I already put in? And I'm through. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Is there anyone else in the public?
There is.
Okay.
Go ahead, Don.
Hi, this is actually his wife. I just wanted to say that I think this is a really good idea. As far as the last comment was concerned about it taking up most of the motel and hotels in the Valley West area. During COVID, they were anyway. They had the Project Room Key going, so they weren't really in use to anybody else. Also, when it comes to federally funded properties, people cannot use on property. And what's really nice about this program, if Arcata House is being a part of it, which they are, is that everyone will come with case management. And hopefully with them coming with case management, that will limit the amount of drug use that's happening and a lot of the other concerns about like breaking and entering and demolishing people's things. So I know we have to do something about the homeless population.
Good start.
And I just think this is a really good start. That was it.
Thank you. Anyone else, David?
There doesn't appear to be.
All right, then the public comment period is now closed and it's time for commission deliberations. Does anyone have any follow-up? Commissioner Tangney?
Just a quick question. There's nobody from the applicant's agent or Arcata House. None of them are here to speak tonight?
They are not. I could certainly address questions about the projects, the population, homeless services in general, and how the project works. Because these aren't meetings on the projects, the representatives for the projects have not attended.
Okay. Shall I go ahead with a couple of questions? Thank you, Chair.
Please.
I sure miss Commissioner White not being here tonight, for one. I feel like this is a very, very big topic. I'm surprised that there isn't a giant line of public comment. And I hope that people are aware, that this is going through and this is their one time with the Planning Commission on it. I'm troubled by the lack of information about who the applicants for this housing would be, and that there's no specific curfews or management, or it feels like this is a lot. There's a bit of a can of worms here that isn't very defined. And I guess I'm just struggling with kind of the lack of information, or how big this feels to me to totally be switching over two of these larger hotels to homeless. As you know, there's a big part of me that thinks it's a wonderful project. But I just don't feel like I have enough information to support it without a lot of thought and consideration. So
I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have, and I can certainly address the the larger question about the switch and what's motivating this.
Okay, yeah, and one specific question is, I'm assuming these are underperforming hotels, and that there's, you know, perhaps a little bit of a need to move them in a different direction, and this is sensible for that. And then if you could answer anything about, you know, what management will look like, if there's going to be on-site supervision, if, you know, when problems come up, it feels like we're adding a lot more permanently housed people in Valley West that might need some caseworker management of some level. And I don't see where that's in this. One of the public comments said many will, but maybe many won't. Maybe some will. I don't know. I just don't know enough. So if you want to address my rambling, go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, and this ties a little bit to some of the comments about, you know, the you know, whether this will be a regional draw, and, you know, what the placement looks like for people being placed in the facility, you know, and so on and so forth. The first sort of highest level big picture distinction between the types of housing that are allowed for in the housing for homeless overlay zone is when you have either a transitional shelter or an emergency shelter. Those are operated as sort of lockdown facilities. Typically, you know, people are there for one night or for a very short period of time. The concept is to try and move them on. It's sort of, you know, done as a interim measure, and there are rules associated with those facilities, you know, including, you know, how you behave, how you come, how you leave, how long you can stay, and so on and so forth. Permanent supportive housing is just regular housing that comes with additional supportive services. So it's not a facility like an emergency shelter. It's a home. The people who are living in that home are generally very low income, extremely low income individuals. And due to the fact that you're placing people who, you know, were formerly homeless, many of them chronically homeless, there's no question that they have many struggles with either mental health, drugs and alcohol, and other issues that they're dealing with in their lives. I guess the one thing to keep in mind is that many people who are on the street don't want to be housed. They don't want to be into a system. They don't want to have to follow any rules. They don't want to have somebody asking them how they're doing. They just want to do what they want to do, and they want to do that out in, outside. And so the people who have decided that, you know, I'm going to move into these facilities, I'm going to take the necessary steps, they've already received enough engagement to get to the point where they've transitioned their mindset. They're willing to start moving on. That's not to say that they're not going to have behavioral issues that are going to impact the community. It's not to say that they won't have, you know, drug and alcohol issues that they'll be dealing with. But it is to say that they've at least made the first choice to start moving in a positive direction. And so both of these facilities would have varying levels of social work, supportive services, food services, laundry services. They'd have services for, for other, drug and alcohol counseling, and et cetera. And so they're sort of a wraparound service provision within, with 24-hour management. At least I know for sure in the Red Roof Inn, the plan is for 24-hour on-site management. and I believe with the Days Inn as well. And so the facilities themselves, the apartments themselves, they'd be converted to full apartments where the people would have, little kitchenettes. They'd be able to, maintain their food there and so on and so forth, and live in it like a home. Those facilities will have, on-site management and then wraparound services. The question around, where are these people coming from? You can't make a one-for-one correlation between the homeless that are in that area right now and homeless that will be living in the facility. They have to be placed based on the funding requirements. They have to be placed through the continuum of care. So people have to get on the list with the county through the continuum of care. And then when their number comes up and they're available, there's a room available, they can move into that room. And so it's not going to be 100% correlation between the people who are living there now homeless and the people who will be moving into this facility. So I don't want to pretend like these facilities are going to clean up, the homeless impacts in that area. But it's important to recognize that Arcata has had a significant increase in homeless impacts over the past couple of years in particular. And the numbers of people living in the streets, in vehicles, living in the brush, and generally finding, our mild climate an appropriate place to move to when they've lost their home for many different reasons, is increasing. It's at near epic proportions, and there's not a neighborhood or a community group that doesn't come to us on a monthly basis and say, we have huge challenges here. We really need help. So the city's involved in and engaged in a multifaceted approach to try and address the housing for homeless people. One of the efforts is this Days Inn and Red Roof Inn project, which would provide permanent supportive housing. One is a pilot car parking project that we're working with Arcata House Partnership on, that is just outside the downtown area, right here off Samoa. And you can tune into council discussions on that. And we need to continually make steps towards providing a range of different services and options for people who are unhoused, in particular, so that we can take a little bit more agency and a little bit more proactive measures towards some of the more impactful elements in the homeless population. If you go out to Hellsport right now, you'll note that there's a practical village encampment in the parking area right there. The APD, the city, we can't do anything about that because of the Ninth Circuit decision that says that unless you have a place for homeless individuals to go, you can't run them out of public places. And so part of the strategy that the city is working on right now is to ensure that we have enough housing for homeless individuals that we can help to place these people. And for those who are, not willing, not ready, not wanting to take advantage of those housing opportunities, we'll have a little bit more leverage on that side of having, hundreds of units of housing for homeless individuals to be able to say, I'm sorry, you can't be here then. You can go into this placement or you need to leave because you're impacting the community center where families no longer feel comfortable coming. So from a big picture, this is one facet of a multifaceted approach to try and provide several opportunities for people in our community to find housing. I think that's sort of the big picture.
May I ask a follow-up question? It sounds like the Days Inn has been operating this way for the last year or so because of COVID, not the Red Roof Inn, right?
That's correct. The Days Inn was renting through the Project Room Key program, which Arcata House Partnership was placing homeless individuals until about June of this year when the funding ran out.
So we've had a year of experience with 60 beds at Days Inn. We're talking about a very large expansion with, was it 138 or 78 additional beds at Red Roof? Do we know how this has worked out, how the impacts have been? This is where I'm kind of astounded that we don't have a representative from any of the agencies that are applicants on this one, aside from yourself, and I appreciate your input, but I'd like to hear from the police chief or Arcata House or somebody like, or the Valley West commercial district. How does it feel? Has it changed anything? Is it working? Does it feel good? Has it been zero problem or has it been a huge problem? I don't know anything about it.
I think it would be hard for folks in the community to quantify. I think to, the speaker's point that has property right next door that says, hey, look, there's a hole in the fence, and that needs to be managed and maintained. That hole probably represents people moving back and forth between the Days Inn and that adjacent property. Certainly having on-site management can help resolve those issues, and maintaining the fences can help resolve those issues. But I don't think that anyone can put their finger specifically on how the Days Inn project has impacted the community. What I can say is that in preparation for the grant applications, we held a couple of public meetings that were fairly well attended. We had about 35, 40 people who participated in an online Zoom meeting that was intended to facilitate comments and questions from the community. We had business representatives. We had folks from the community, including Kimberly White, who was in attendance and who lives in the area. And many of the questions that you have in attachment B, the questions and responses, were generated through that meeting. We also had a meeting that members of the community attended independently that was held specifically to get feedback from the target population about what resources they felt like they would need in a facility that was targeted towards chronically homeless and at risk of homeless individuals. And at both of those meetings, there was definitely some concern, some skepticism, and I think we had speakers speak to some of the concerns about crime and drug use and violence in the neighborhood. But many also recognize the benefits of having a program like this and the ability to actually do something about it to try and get these people who are right now living on the street into the continuum of care and placed in this permanent housing. So I think it would be a little nebulous and probably pretty speculative for people to pinpoint exactly what the impact has been. What I can tell you is that there hasn't been an extreme negative impact, because that would have been easy to pinpoint. And I can also tell you, you had mentioned whether the hotels are underperforming. Based on my understanding, my knowledge of the clientele at the Red Roof Inn, the folks that stay there now, many of them are very transitory. They're, homeless parts of the time. They're just not as, they generate some income and then stay for a time at Red Roof, and then they move in and out. So even that facility is at least in part, housing people who are marginally housed in the community right now. All of those individuals would be eligible and able to, to get into the continuum of care list to be placed in these facilities and have a permanent home.
Do we have any other questions? Commissioner Mayer?
Yeah, I was not aware that this was still supposed to be just questions. I thought this was, I thought we had moved on because we had already asked for the public to comment.
We're doing deliberations, and I'm going to look for a motion.
Okay.
Do you want to make a motion?
No, I would like to ask some questions and make some comments. And I would comment first that I do not think we're yet ready for a motion. This is a deceptively simple proposal for a change to the housing for the homeless combining zone portion of our zoning code. When the Planning Commission adopted those zoning provisions in 2009, we considered and deliberated and reviewed plans exhaustively. Staff now is claiming that, well, really, we don't need to go into any of those details because in this case, what we're what we're just doing is we're separating permanent supportive housing from emergency shelters and transitional housing, and in effect making a place for permanent supportive housing along with other affordable housing. I don't know that I might have paraphrased that badly, David, but in effect, this is the simple action that we're being asked to make. When we undertook the zoning change that provided for this combining zone in the first place, there was a wide range of considerations that we reviewed very specifically for permanent supportive housing, like the ABC project. And I don't see any of the information with regard to those types of considerations here before us in this proposed action. Particularly, I'm assuming one of the reasons that we've had so few comments from the public this evening is because people are storing them up for the city council meeting tomorrow. Ultimately, they will be the decision makers in this case. And I'm assuming that that's kind of where the very robust discussion may end up taking place. However, one of the things that this deceptively simple change would do would be to concentrate housing for the lowest income housed populations in Arcata in one specific neighborhood, a neighborhood that the city has admitted has been underserved with numerous types of city services in the past. And the city is trying to repair that. And so I'm wondering if this particular measure is actually a step in that direction. And I'm assuming that at the city council level, there will be some discussion about what's in it for this neighborhood. And I know that there are a number of projects that the city is considering. There's no way to tie them to this project. But in making this change to extend the map to cover the conversion of these two hotels, I think it is important to recognize that concentrating the poor in what in the 1990s would have been called warehousing the poor in only one neighborhood in this way, it is an aspect that we as the Planning Commission really ought to be considering. It happens that the money is available to convert hotels, and all of our hotels, barring one, are in one neighborhood. So we're rushing to get this money while we have a bonus available by January 31st without actually considering these issues. The fact that Arcata House and Danco are not represented here, I'm assuming they'll be at the city council, is as distressing to me as it is to Commissioner Tangney. We also have no information about the supportive aspects of the permanent supportive housing being proposed here. And changing the zoning for this area without that is a bit of a problem. We have promises that there will be caseworker, there will be staffing, there will be a wide range of services, what we've heard called wraparound services for this population. And I'm assuming some of that is going to be coming from the grants that will be coming to the city. But do we have any assurance that if grant money in the future is not available, that the city will come up with the funds for continuing each and every one of those services? We don't. It's not here in this proposal. It certainly was in other types of proposals. We had assurances that there might be services from somewhere, and it is a concern looking toward the future. We changed the zoning. That's for a very long time. We've been assured that in the housing to be provided, there will be only permanent supportive housing at a given level. When you look at these sites, especially the Red Roof Inn, I'm doubtful that those limited numbers would be retained over the long term. And in fact, some of the testimony at the events the city sponsored apparently was also questioning that. So it would be great to have more information from Arcata House and Danco and the city about exactly the level of effect, the number of residents who really would be served here. And finally, I know I have a lot of things to say here. If you look at the proposed language of the draft ordinance 1554, it's on page 113 of our packets. There's an HH combining zone applicability section. It's B here. And I noticed that by, in effect, splitting off permanent supportive housing, we still have language that would allow the HH combining zone to include any industrial district, or to potentially be applied to industrial districts. And one of the things I'd point out is that although emergency housing may be appropriate in some of those districts, permanent housing really shouldn't be. And the language of this ordinance is kind of ambiguous on that, except for showing us those maps on the next few pages. So yeah, I think that Arcata needs to do its share in providing housing for currently houseless and at-risk people. I think there's a big problem in concentrating it all in one neighborhood already struggling with people who feel underserved by services. So that's, I guess, my comments. And the question then would be, what guarantees do we have of the long-term uses of that land, other than, yes, this would only be for these numbers of people at the moment? And second, what guarantee do we have of continued supportive services for that housing in the long term, which is the basis of changing the zoning ordinance?
Did you want me to answer this?
Yep.
Okay. So just to start with, the commission certainly can take any action it wishes to take. It can adopt this resolution, making a recommendation for approval. It could modify the resolution and adopt it, making a recommendation for denial. The council not take that action, or it could tell the council, look, we just need more time. And I do want to recognize that, this is coming together much more quickly than the time when we first adopted the Housing for Homeless Overlay Zone, where we went through an exhaustive search across the entire city for which properties were appropriate to place these zones on. And ultimately, the properties that were located were reflected in 2-23, which is under the current proposal to be 2-23.1. I want to note that those properties are scattered throughout the city, including areas, on the southernmost portion in the South G Street area, along Samoa Boulevard, the 250 East Street location, which is 3 blocks from downtown, as well as the Alder Grove Industrial Park. Amongst those properties, the only properties that were city owned, the only public properties that were included in those, the only properties that would have a likely chance of becoming housing for the homeless, were the Alder Grove Industrial Park properties, which have issues and constraints to actually serving homeless individuals, and the 250 East Street project, which we had already in the hopper when we were doing this work, plans for a grant to do that project. So the housing for homeless overlay zone actually is scattered throughout the city, including in areas near the downtown. In terms of housing for lower income individuals being concentrated, we actually have projects, again, scattered all throughout downtown. Arcata House Partnership has properties located on 15th Street, 11th Street, Janes Road. There's the 250 East Street, which is off of Samoa. There's I can tell you numerous properties that have either regulatory agreements with the city of Arcata that we've provided very low and extremely low income housing, or just low income housing. Plaza Point, which is right in the downtown area. The Sorrel Place, which is just off downtown, certainly within the sphere of downtown area. There's the Plaza Apartments on Alliance, and there are several apartments that are including the Courtyards and the River Community Homes that are up in the north part of Arcata. And so I recognize that this change has two properties that are located in what is arguably a lower income area. Certainly there are lower income both rental and for sale residential properties in the vicinity in the Valley West, Valley East neighborhood, Allen Drive, and et cetera. And so certainly, adding two properties where you're acknowledging these are going to be lower income properties in that area, if you look at just those properties, appears to be a concentration. But if you think about the projects that have been implemented and the properties that are already built, they're actually fairly well distributed throughout the city, with notable and obvious areas that don't have any, such as Arcata Heights, Bayview, Diamond Drive, and et cetera. In terms of the supportive housing, again, I'm more than happy to share, what the proposals are, and we can get into those in greater detail if this answer doesn't suffice. And certainly the City Council will be taking us up tomorrow in greater detail. But I do want to acknowledge that these are outside the purview of the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission's role is to review the findings for approval for, making the modification to the zoning and ensuring that the zoning allows for, those decisions to be made. And right now, the provision for ensuring that, affordable housing plans are appropriately adopted, implemented, and that operations plans are adopted and implemented. Those happen at the, generally speaking, at the loan level. So the City Council is reviewing those and ensuring that when we go out for a grant and we make a loan to one of our affordable housing providers, we enter into a regulatory agreement that's based on an affordable housing plan, which describes all those operational details. And they really vary depending on the kind of project. So a project like the 250 East Street, which is permanent supportive housing, has a much more rigorous operations plan than, say, a project like, Plaza Point, which is just residential, apartments for very low income seniors. But notwithstanding, the supportive housing that's provided is in order to secure the grants that they're going for, they have to demonstrate that they have 10 years worth of operating capital. So all of the supportive housing, all of the supportive elements of the housing have to be guaranteed for 10 years. In addition to that, the City of Arcata is proposing to enter a 55-year affordable housing regulatory agreement with these properties to ensure that they continue to maintain some level of affordability out into the future. Now, because these projects are very expensive to run, the supportive housing elements to that, the city and the applicants will continue to need to, secure grant funds and other sources to, including subsidies, to make sure that they have operational funds to run these. The applicants are working with the Housing Authority, with the county through its No Place Like Home funding sources, and various other, granting agencies to ensure that they can continue these services long term. The loan agreements, however, will have a scaling so that if we if a service cannot be provided, or if the project is looking like it's going to fail because of those operations questions, there will be a scaling for the depth of targeting to ensure that there's enough operational funds. And so the city will be able to work with these property owners, work with the project owners to ensure that the programs maintain viability. And then ultimately, if they don't maintain viability, if there's no way for that project to maintain viability, it's just operationally, it's a bust after they get through this first cycle, the project would have to be sold and the city would be repaid the grant funds. The project home key projects will come with a forgivable loan. And then the city is also making some community development block grant funds available for the Red Roof Inn. Those would be based on residual receipts where we'd get those repaid. But if the project failed, we would get repaid those money and we'd be able to put those into an affordable housing project somewhere else in the city. In terms of the number of residents, when we were at one of the stakeholder engagements, a representative from Danco started talking about ideas that they had thought about for the property into the future, including some commercial uses, some additional residential uses, ways to provide, anything ranging from, a police substation to, one-stop shop facilities for county mental health services to locate on the site. All of that was speculative. All of that was just sort of him free-form discussing thoughts and ideas to figure out, does the community want these elements included in the future at some subsequent phase? Right here and now, none of those provisions, except potentially the related mental health services and social services, would be allowed or authorized with the current or the proposed zoning. And so all of those were speculations that had no bearing in the decision that's being made now or bearing in reality. There's no funding behind them. There's no true proposal. It was simply to find out the community's interest in those ideas. And so the zoning that's being proposed now would only allow projects similar to what's being proposed in terms of permanent supportive housing. Lastly, I heard the question about the housing for homeless combining zone applicability section on page 113 and a concern that this might be applied in other districts. And I just wanted to clarify for the community and for the commission that that applicability section is saying that it could be, the housing for homeless combining zone could be applied in all these different areas, but the only areas where it actually is applied are the areas that are mapped on figure 2-23.1 and 2. And so it can be applied to any of those zoning districts, but it is only applied to the zoning districts that are included in the maps. So there's no risk of, for instance, someone opening a permanent supportive housing in an industrial site without the Planning Commission taking action to approve that site unless it's already included, like the Alder Grove industrial parcels. So I hope I addressed those questions that you had, Commissioner Mayor, Vice Chair Mayor.
Do you have any additional questions? Clarifications? Are we ready to make a motion or where are we? I guess we don't have a motion. Oh, Commissioner Barstow?
Yeah, I totally support this resolution and I want to move that we accept the resolution.
So we have a motion from Commissioner Barstow. Do we have a second? Okay, I guess motion is going to fail for lack of a second.
Okay, I will communicate that to the City Council.
Commissioner Mayor?
I'd like to ask a question and then propose an alternative motion. The question is, given the very much accelerated schedule on this undertaking, presumably so the city can meet that January deadline for the funding bonus. Would there be enough time for the city council to consider the issue and bring out the additional information, which is so very lacking in the proposal as it came to us, so that the planning commission could then consider the zoning issue in time for the city to meet that funding application deadline? Presumably that means that the city council would discuss it as scheduled tomorrow. There'd be quite a bit of additional information available in writing to us, and we could then review it at a January meeting before that deadline. Is that a possibility?
It's certainly a possibility. The hearing was noticed for the city council to consider introduction tomorrow night's meeting. With the lack of a second, effectively the planning commission has made a recommendation for denial of, or a recommendation to not adopt this ordinance. So the city council has that recommendation, and I think this additional recommendation could certainly be considered by the council. I think that I'd like to know maybe a list of specific questions that the planning commission would like to have addressed, because certainly there is a couple of timeframes that we're working against in order to meet this current funding cycle. But at the same time, there are many elements that need to line up before those approvals can be made. So long story short, yeah, I think it can be done. Certainly can be done. January would be a pretty tight timeline because you'd have to have a special meeting, or the city council would have to have a special meeting in order to adopt the ordinance. But it's possible that the council could approve the grant applications and take up the zoning ordinance at a future time. So all of those are possible options.
Okay, then I would like to make an alternative motion, which is that I move that the Planning Commission recommend that the City Council review relevant information based on information not available to the Planning Commission at this time, and that the Planning Commission revisit this proposal at a future meeting, ideally in time for the city to make this application in January. I don't know if it makes sense in that motion to indicate a date certain, but I think probably not.
I would actually ask you to continue this hearing to a date certain. We have a noticed hearing. The notices aren't cheap. We're doing this on the cheap. There's absolutely no money to fund this work. And so if you're hedging your bets that the Planning Commission would be able to review this again on the 11th based on the City Council's deliberations tomorrow, I would suggest that you do that. That preserves our notice. It allows us to continue this hearing item without having to renotice it.
Okay, in that case, my motion will be to continue this item to our meeting on our regular meeting on January 11th, with additional information that may be available at that time.
Okay.
So that's the motion, yeah.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Okay. Can we get a roll call, please?
Yeah. Davies?
Aye.
Barstow?
Aye.
Figueroa?
Aye.
Tagney?
Aye.
Vice Chair Mayor?
Aye.
And Chair Vasidalka?
Aye. Now, here's the hard part. What additional information Commissioner Mayor, are you going to work with David to give him the information? What additional information are you asking for?
I'd like to chime in on that too.
Yeah.
Well, we asked a number of things came up about what this place is, what it's going to actually look like, how it's going to function, how the impact on the neighborhood has been for the last year of experience. And I'd like to hear something from the police department. I'm imagining they have a little bit of interaction with the facility. So neighborhood impacts, any guidelines, any kind of, what can we really count on for management? Because we've heard about social workers and we've heard about, continuum of care and things like this, but it's still really, I'm reflecting back on when ABC was going through and the intense scrutiny. There was so much neighborhood involvement with that project and so much city and agency involvement and an extensive discussion about exactly who and what it's going to look like and hours of service and all kinds of stuff. And I don't need that kind of detail, but I just need to know that this thing is, that we're not just kind of throwing this out at Valley West and saying, good luck, figure it out. Here's a couple hundred more beds.
I could certainly bring that information back. I would strongly encourage the Planning Commission to listen or watch the City Council meeting tomorrow night as well. And in addition, I just want to make a distinguish between the ABC project and the information that came out around that project, which was a use permit and then a loan application for the project versus the underlying housing for homeless overlay zone, which or combining zone, which happens separately. Those are kind of two separate processes. But we'll certainly bring that information back. And I think that, if commissioners have specific concerns that they can relate to me offline, just email me directly and I will work to develop that information for the next hearing if it becomes necessary.
Thank you, David.
Yes, please do email David. Okay, so moving on, we have one business item.
Yeah, and I appreciate the fact that it's almost 9 o'clock now, and really appreciate everyone's ongoing patience. We had a lot of big agenda items. We do have a couple of presentations and several people that are in attendance tonight that I think are interested in this. And so I just want to take a pulse on the commission real quick before we get started. And then also, if we are going to continue with this, which I would recommend, just to request that we take a quick bio break.
Are we ready to take a little break? Say, how long, David? 5 minutes? 10?
Yeah, 5 minutes sounds good.
Okay, 5 minutes.
Please.
5 minute
2
break.
minutes. Okay.
5. are back. Thank you for staying with us. We have a business item now, the draft gateway area plan. Do we have a report, David?
Yeah, absolutely. Do have a report here. We've kind of got it broken into two pieces. I think both pieces are really critical, but recognizing the late hour, I also want to do a check-in at some point through the middle of my presentation, and then a check-in at the end to make sure that we still have stamina to go forward. Again, we do have about 20 attendees online, and I anticipate many of them will wish to make their comments known to you. I do have a PowerPoint presentation and a presentation I'd like to make for you tonight. I'm going to, for the sake of focusing on this presentation, going to kind of minimize my screen here. And so if you have questions, you want to jump in at any time to ask for a clarification, feel free to just interrupt me. I won't see you raising your hands, I guess is what I'm trying to tell you. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started with this. The presentation shares some elements with recent presentations we've done. We had a workshop on last Thursday. We also have recorded on our website, on the SERP website, an hour-long presentation of the draft plan to orient folks to it. I'm going to focus in on a couple of key elements that I think are of interest and that we've been hearing a lot of public comment about in the presentation tonight that I'm providing for you. Just want to recognize that this plan has been put together in partnership with Plan West partners, Ben Noble Consulting and GHD, and a partnership with the city. Okay, so big question, why are we doing this? I'm hearing this a lot. Okay, first, it was part of climate adaptation planning. You see on the map here, the 1870 shoreline that was mapped at the time. You can see it is superimposed upon the city's map. Here's South G&H Street with our wastewater treatment plant, and the ox ponds and marshes, treatment marshes, Highway 255, and Bayside Road. You'll see that area mirrors this LiDAR imagery showing topography. The sort of transition between the green and red zones roughly is the approximation of that 1870 shoreline. And so that's where the bay used to be. We diked it about 100 plus years ago. And the projections are that into the future, by 2100, these areas, if we do nothing to stop the rising sea levels, will approximate that same extent. The plan area is just outside of that. So this is part of our sea level rise adaptation planning work that we're doing. The zone 1 is sort of the fallback zone, allowing zone 2, which is lower lying lands that are less protected, to succumb to sea level rise more quickly than zone 1, where we have significant infrastructure. You've heard this wrap before when we've talked about our local coastal program update planning, and we've talked about the strategies that the city is proposing to use to retreat from this area that'll be subject to sea level rise. Once zone 1 has to be abandoned at some point in the future, it may be infeasible to defend this. That plan area, the core downtown area outside of zone 1, is sort of the next fallback position. So that's a critical area for the city of Arcata's future development. If I can advance my slides here. The other areas of city policy that this plan implements, we have strong infill policies. Those strong infill policies are based on trying to protect the green zones, the bottomlands, the bay, and the forest lands that surround us. And so this is not new policy. This has been in effect for the last 20 years. So it implements, our sustainability goals, our adaptation planning goals. In addition, through the work that we did with the housing element and the infill market study, we identified these key areas and started describing the features of development that needed to occur in these areas in order to both meet our housing and economic development goals, as well as to meet our sustainability objectives. That was codified in the housing element, which was done through tons of participation with the community starting in 2019. And that was adopted in early 2020. Ultimately, in April of 2021, City Council authorized a contract with Plan West Partners and their team to conduct this work. This work involves the gateway area plan, a new code within that plan that we'll go over in depth, and then some in the future, and some updates to the general plan. And so the City Council authorized this scope of services that we're working on now. Okay, so, well, what is the gateway plan? That's the next big question we wanted to address. Well, the gateway plan is a draft that's being circulated right now for public comment that identifies various policy areas, racial equity, equitable housing, arts and culture, open spaces, etc., that apply within a specific geographic region. This specific geographic region is shown in yellow here, and it's bordered by Samoa Boulevard, K Street, Alliance, O Street, and Q Street. There's 11th Street for reference. Here's the Creamery building proper in the center of the Creamery district. And here's the trail, Class 1 trail that was installed along L Street. Just to give you some reference, it also includes some of the commercial areas that are along Samoa Boulevard to bring in the rest of this gateway concept. So that's the area that's in the regulatory authority of the gateway area plan. Wanted to also point to this little blue dashed line. That's the coastal zone boundary. Everything south of it or to the bottom of the screen is within the zone. Everything north of it is outside of the coastal zone. And so when we adopt this gateway area plan and the subsequent zoning ordinance associated with it, we'll also have to go through the process to submit that to the Coastal Commission for their review and approval before it becomes part of our certified LCP. Okay, so what is the gateway area plan? Now, all of these graphics are taken straight out of the plan. You can find this information in the plan, but I just wanted to walk you through it and key you into certain elements. So the gateway area plan is an element of the general plan. Ultimately, it applies exclusively to the gateway area, but it will be embodied within that larger general plan work. The general plan and this gateway area plan outline the policy, the implementation measures, and specific programs to achieve the goals of that plan. The plan will ultimately be refined into and expressed through the gateway zoning code. This is to be developed. At this point, we do not have the gateway zoning code because we haven't resolved on this higher level planning document that will set the framework. We're going through the public process right now, including tonight, to get information on what that should look like. Well, how do we do this? There are a lot of sites in this area that are, vacant or underutilized or fairly readily redeveloped. And so in the opportunity sites, starting on page 37 of the plan, we identify all of these sites. We talk about what the existing conditions are, how large the site is, and what opportunities are available on those sites, including things like open space, creek daylighting, bike ped trails, medium to high density residential development, etc. We estimate the residential unit capacity, giving a range based on the flexibility that should be built into the code, and then identify other potential uses. So there are sites A through K that we've done this for, and identified what these options and uses would be. The area in total is broken down into 4 specific zones, and then there's also a natural resource area. So we have the Gateway Barrel District in the southernmost portion, kind of an homage to the old cow barrel that operated in that area. There's the Gateway Corridor, which is a commercial corridor that encompasses parts of Samoa as well as K Street. Those will have specific standards associated with that corridor. There's the Gateway Hub, sort of the central area, the heart of the Gateway area. And then we have these Gateway neighborhood transition areas where you would have different zoning standards in each of these different areas. So Table 7 in the document talks about high level what the land use structure would look like. It goes through each of these different districts. You'll see the Gateway Barrel District over here on the left-hand side, the Gateway Hub, Gateway Corridor, Gateway Neighborhood. They all have different densities and development standards. And then there's this crazy thing about community benefits bonus tiers, and we'll talk about those in just a minute. But to go through this exercise, let's look first at the Gateway Barrel District. So this is the highest density area on the southernmost portion of the Gateway area, right along Samoa there. You'll notice that the Gateway Barrel District allows for the highest number of maximum stories, the tallest buildings. Currently, it's proposed 8 stories. Now, certainly this is part of the discussion we need to have with the community. Many people have thought that this is too tall. Several people embrace it. This is definitely part of the community discussion that we need to have. The tiers start at 4, at what we call the base tier. You can see base tier is 4 levels. So minimum 4 levels going up to 5, 6, 7, and 8, depending on the community benefits bonus tier that you fit into. I'll describe in a little bit more detail what these entail, but just know that as you go up this community benefits bonus tier, get more elevation, more maximum stories. You're providing more back to the community in these community benefits, which function largely like conditions of approval do with a new structure for permitting. Again, the minimum residential density instead of the maximum residential density. So we flipped it on its head. We've said, look, we want to get units out of these projects. Minimum base tier, 18 dwelling units per acre, maximum with the community benefits bonus tier, maximum minimum, if you will, the lowest that you can accept if you have that highest bonus tier is 53. So you'd have a minimum of 53 units in those projects. Okay, so just to look at an example, of what this might look like. Many folks in the community hear 8 stories. They imagine walking up to the street frontage, an 8-story building shooting straight up in the air, imposing, looming over them. That's not the idea. Let's walk through an example of that in the Gateway Barrel District. Gateway Barrel District has a lot of opportunities for improving habitat. There are some wetlands, there are some green spaces. You can connect these with adjacent green spaces that are already included in the natural resources zoning district. Put some trails throughout. Trails would also likely go through this, the Barrel District. You're gonna need a new transportation system to carry cars that'll be traveling off of L Street and or Samoa. And again, this is cartoonish on purpose. The intent is not that this is the actual development, but that we would develop a system for a concept here, a campus concept for how this could be developed. You might have under the current proposal some 8-story towers, some 7-story buildings, maybe a couple of 4-story buildings included in there. And then there would also be an area that would be open to the public, similar to the plaza. That would be a great community asset, and all of this is, again, to be determined through this zoning code. But you can see with this sort of cartoonish rendition of a concept plan that there's quite a bit of available open space. And so all of this open space could be dedicated to community purposes, community uses, privately held public open spaces. Some of it could be dedicated, it could be trails. It could be, outdoor dining areas for restaurants. There's lots of uses that could be used here, or could be done in that area. Let's take a look at one of the lower tiers. So going into the Gateway Hub, that's the next lowest tier for development. And again, the way that these community benefits bonus tiers work is that they're optional up to a certain level, depending on the zone you're in. In this particular zone, in the Gateway Hub, it's not permitted to enter the bonus tier 4. You can't do an 8-story building. Many people have spread the misconception that there's going to be 8-story buildings all over the district. That's simply not true. In the current proposal, the way that it's defined, it's also simply not true because we haven't gone through the public process yet and identified what the maximum build out should be. These are going to be trade-offs for the community, for the council, for future generations to identify, do we allow for larger buildings, which would be a more efficient use of the space, the limited land base that we have left, or do we use smaller buildings and require other uses instead, or do we require smaller buildings and not have as much open space? So there's lots of policies that could be balanced here. Getting back to the tiers, you can see that on the Gateway Hub, you could build up to a 7-story building, but the base tier is 4. Again, you'd have to provide those community benefits. Minimum densities, they follow the same ranges. Minimum height, minimum stories is still 2 and 3. And so on and so forth for the Gateway Corridor and the Gateway Neighborhood. You see the Gateway Neighborhood, which was the transitional zone, would allow up to a 5-story building. So Table 7 kind of explains how these community benefits tiers work. not everybody gets their information real well through a table, so I'm going to show you graphically what that means. In this area, you could have maximum of 8 stories. In the Gateway Hub, maximum of 7 stories, Corridor 6, and the Neighborhood 5. All of these would require community amenities, including publicly available private outdoor space, alternative transportation options, energy and sustainability, and affordable housing, for example. We went to the committees, the City of Arcata, the various committees, and sought their input for what they would rank highest in terms of community amenities, and had discussions with them through 2021 with intensive meetings through July of 2021. And we plan on going back and sharing with them what we heard and how we used it. The way we used it was to translate it into this community benefit program, which will be created through the Gateway Zoning Code. And it'll create a community benefits program where projects that provide higher levels of community benefits are permitted greater intensity. Utilize and build upon the tiered incentives system presented above in Table 6, 7, and Image 2. So this plan is outlining the framework that will be implemented through this community benefits program in the zoning code. I'm going to show you an example of that next, what it could look like. We've done a little bit of back of the napkin work to try and figure out how does this actually work. I also wanted to point to that last policy that we would periodically review the community benefits program to ensure that it's still achieving the goals that we established for it. So those could be tweaked one way or the other. So the community benefits bonus track, depending on which one you're on, you need to provide the way that it's structured right now, greater than 6, greater than 7, greater than 8, or greater than 9 points through the community amenities points system. Well, how do you get those points? Well, let's take housing, for example. Housing is an important element of this plan. There's lots of ways that you could get points, and you could only get a maximum of 5 points within this category. This would encourage or require rather the projects that come in under this program to select these community amenities in different policy areas. So we're starting with housing. We could go on to energy and resources. We could go on to affordable housing. Go on to open space and some of the other areas. But for this, for example, category 1, housing amenities, maximum 5 points. You might say, hey, look, we want owner-occupied housing. We've heard this a lot from folks. So the total percentage of the residential units that are owner-occupied is greater than some number. We need to figure that number out. This would allow those larger scale, high density buildings to condo and then sell off those individual condos and provide home ownership in the community. Maybe we have deed restricted affordable housing. They'd get a bonus point for that to fit towards this community amenities program. Small units that are affordable by design could be one of those. And so each of these would fall within these different policy areas: housing creation, arts and culture, open space, green building and sustainability, active and alternative transportation, enhanced architectural features and exterior design, and retail and job creation. So those are the, in the Gateway Area Plan, those are the general ideas of what we'd be drilling down into in the zoning code once we've resolved on this. Okay, well, the next big question, I can hear you thinking it already, but what about open space and trails? We have identified some pretty exciting new trail and open space networks. Just going through the open space real quick, down in the Barrel District, I'd mentioned the plaza-sized area, this exact location to be determined. The brownish, reddish, whatever color you see this outline here shows areas within the Barrel District as well as the Gateway Hub, and including some of the corridor. Each of these would provide some private, or there would be private open space that's accessible to the public within these boundaries. Not necessarily on every project, but we'd identify those through the zoning code. Scooting over just a little bit, there's the natural resources zoned area that has wetlands on it now, and homeless encampments and bicycle shops. Maybe not the best use of land for the community in general. We could turn this into a public amenity, a privately held open space that has trails. Scooting up to the northern end of the district, we have Shea Park that extends down to some creek restoration work that have been completed and or is planned that connects the creek between 11th Street and Alliance. In addition, there are some connections between the O Street extent and M Street that could be expanded based on existing easements. Okay, well, what about trails? The trails element is really exciting. I was talking to Rob Homeland, one of our consultants on the Plan West team, and he told me that the total number of trails is more than doubling in this area. So looking at the southern end, we have multi-use, class 2, class 3 bike route, class 3 bike boulevard, multi-use paths, class 2 bike lanes, et cetera, et cetera. We've even got planned for a WUNRF. WUNRF is essentially a low-speed street that cars may use, but cars expect to see bikes and peds milling about, and it's kind of a people street. So looking at the trails that could be extended from L Street, through the district, along the rail corridors, the existing along Q Street, Bike Boulevard, transformed on 8th and 9th Streets and extended on K Street. So lots of new bike and ped infrastructure here that will be implemented. Moving north just a little bit, you can see the L Street. In this proposal, the trail that we have would need to be relocated just a little bit to accommodate some of the circulation patterns, but we're maintaining that, and then we're adding a new trail on N Street that gets you up to Alliance Road at the northern end. I know what you're thinking now, but what about bikes, peds, and parking? The circulation system is going to change if adopted in this current version. Right now we have G and H Street as one-way couplets. Each of those has 2 lanes of traffic, 2 lanes of parking, and then sidewalks. There's a bike lane on each of these in each direction. 8th and 9th Street are existing one-way couplets through the downtown. All of those roads are represented here in white. The proposed new roads, transformation of the road system, is shown in yellow. So extending the 9th and 8th Street couplet, one-way couplet, extending that all the way out to N Street, and providing additional bike and ped amenities on there. And then transforming K Street into a one-way, one-lane, northbound, and L Street into a one-way, one-lane, southbound couplet that includes some exciting bike and ped amenities as well. Let's just take a quick look at K Street, this one-way concept that's proposed here. Zooming in on K a little bit closer, you'll see that there's modified intersections where the sidewalk is bulbed out. That makes for a smaller intersection crossing, a safer intersection crossing. Again, it's one way. Northbound on K, 8th would be one way. And so this drastically reduces the number of interactions between cars and people crossing the street and cars and bikes. I also wanted to point to the fact that the bike lane is separated here. It's not completely segregated, but it at least has this line buffer, and there's a special place for bikes to be as opposed to the current situation where there's a sharrow on K Street. I'm willing to get out there and rumble with the vehicles, but not everybody's comfortable doing that. And it truly is not the safest place for me to be either. Looking at what we're doing on L, again, the concept, maintaining the segregated trail system and turning it into a one-way with on-street parking. Let's flip it over here so we're facing the right direction. Facing north, there's currently a landscaping buffer. I'm sorry, facing south, there's currently a landscaping buffer on the far right-hand side. You get onto the segregated class 1 trail system that we all love and ride on. There's a vegetative buffer, and then you get into the vehicle lane. We would turn this from a 2-way into a 1-way and provide on-street vehicle parking with an 8-foot sidewalk. Currently, it looks like this. You would maintain that landscape buffer, have the rail to trail, have a new vegetative, or maintain the vegetative buffer, the vehicle lanes, vehicle parking, and sidewalk. That's what it'll look like on the ground. Just looking quickly at 8th and 9th Street. Again, this one-way couplet, lots of on-street parking, segregated bike lanes, special bike lanes, not completely segregated, but wrapping around the entire district, those bulbed out sidewalks with special crossing areas. So huge improvement in terms of bike and ped access, modest reduction in on-street parking, but not significant, and lots of ideas for improved access to individual properties Again, you'll note that we have planned here some public access. We still need to, some of these elements, we still need to, get concurrence with the property owners. So this is the plan. We still need lots of implementation. L Street for one, and some of these others for another. I did want to address a issue that came up in the public. They said, "Hey, your drawing shows, the sidewalk going right through my house. My house is there. How are you doing that?" I just want to, let people know that the scale of these drawings, these are for illustrative purposes. Certainly, if there are areas where there are conflicts, we'll work with the engineering department and city manager's office to ensure that, that we resolve those conflicts amicably. So I just want to wrap up by, kind of focusing again a little bit on this special place we call home, or a special place where we work, or a special place where we visit. It's an amazing location. It's growing because it's such an amazing location. We want to take concepts that that are tried and true, like our downtown area, the mixed use, vibrant community that we see down there, and leverage those. We want to multiply the rainbows in our community. We want to be able to provide additional recreational opportunities and places to work in this area. So it's mixed use, mixed income, mixed everything. It's a great place. It's kind of a cultural center, arts center. We want to be able to leverage this great arts and culture while respecting the green spaces we have around us. And really, the goal is to build community through this plan. I understand a lot of people have been involved in the plan for a long time. A lot of people are feeling late to the game. You're not late to the game. The party's just starting. We want to hear from you. The city council wants to hear from you, and so does the planning commission. And so that is the end. And I'd be happy to answer any questions or kind of skip to check in. See how we're doing on time, and maybe offer the next presentation, which is also very good and presented by our Plan West team.
Are we taking any public comment, or is this just a strictly business item?
I would advise you take at least some public comment. We do have a little over 20 people on the line, many of whom I suspect will wish to make some public comment.
Yeah, let's let them. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So skip the next presentation.
What does the commission think? Are you guys ready? Are you guys awake? Do you want to watch more, or?
I mean, what's the goal to get, where are we trying to get to tonight? And are we discussing possibly continuing this whole discussion over a number of meetings, or are we just going until we can't do any more this evening?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. This is one of many opportunities over the course of the next year to engage on this topic. The document was just released, and so we wanted to share it with the public. We wanted to share it with the decision makers. Certainly, if you have comments, if you've read the document, or if you want to just absorb, that's great. No decisions are being made. No final decisions are being made on this document at either tonight's meeting or at tomorrow night's city council meeting. Ultimately, the documents won't be adopted until the environmental work is done. That'll take us approximately a year. So about this time next year, we'll be coming back, and towards the fall and winter, we'll be having discussions about adoption of this and many other long-range planning documents that are proposed. I do want to be clear that over the short term, next couple of months, we do need to make some high-level decisions about the gateway plan, because we have to start producing the zoning code. And so, we'll be spending, December, January, February, trying to have as much discussion with the committees, the commission, the planning, the city council, to make sure that we've got a direction with the gateway area plan. And then we'll leverage that into the gateway zoning code that will further refine the details on how to implement this vision.
I would recommend that we let the public talk if they want to. It's 9:20. People have families and work tomorrow morning, and then maybe we can continue the rest of the presentation, or for the next meeting?
Sounds great. Okay. Did you want to continue the 3-minute time limit for speakers?
Sure.
Okay, Greg.
Unmute. There we are. You can hear me?
Good job. Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead, Greg.
Thank you. And thank you, David, and thank you, Planning Commission. I know it's kind of a thankless job. So I'm going to thank you because I do see all the work that you all put in, and David, to you as well. I think that the idea of 3,500 new units in this area might be a little much for Arcata to contemplate over the next even 20 years. But I think that what it speaks to that isn't mentioned, David, in your presentation is HSU doubling or more its population. And it's kind of the hippopotamus in the room here, if you will. And I think that needs to be discussed. And I also want to know, I want the city to provide information that has been shared between the city and the state with regard to the college and its growth. What is being planned between the city and the state? We want to see the correspondence. We want to know what you all are talking about because we're completely in the dark, residents of Arcata. Secondly, I represent Siskiyou Land Conservancy, president and executive director, and we are taking the unusual step of actually taking this on as a project. And the reason is because, like a lot of people, a lot of entities, we see this as an opportunity. We see it as an opportunity for a municipality in this country to actually understand that we are in a climate crisis. That's the first thing you talked about, David. And that the #1 contributor from Humboldt County is transportation. And this plan has a lot of nice things built in. By the way, the paint on the road is not protection. I appreciate the new green lines and stuff, but as a cyclist in this town, I can tell you right now, that ain't gonna do it. But you know, we're like, you know, support a car-free lifestyle. We're gonna encourage developers, pedestrian and bicycle-friendly corridors, things like that. We wanna see a plan that says in 20 years, Arcata is going to have fewer car trips in the city than it has now in 2021. And that will be our contribution, an actual contribution to dealing with this crisis that is really overwhelming the entire planet and our children's future. My daughter, who was, you know, raised here in Arcata, she deserves better. And rather than, you know, this density with everybody can come with a car, and I have a car, and it's not a purist thing, but I want you to make it more difficult and more expensive for me to drive my car, my 1 mile to the co-op, and to make it easier and 100% safer to get there on my bike. And when you do that, that's when you get the cyclists. Paint on the road is not protection. We need dedicated lanes. We need pavement taken away from cars. Pavement taken away from cars. We have to do this. It's a failed experiment. And if we don't do it, then this will be a disaster for our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. That was 3 minutes. Thank you for your comment. Matt Simmons, you are up.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Yeah, this is Matt Simmons. I'm here representing Rocker, the Redwood Coalition for Environmental and Climate Responsibility. I want to say that we think this is a really great step for Arcata to take, you know, supporting infill development and increased density and increased, you know, biking and pedestrian opportunities is really fantastic. Mixed use development, which we don't have enough of in Arcata, would also really make this a more walkable and livable community. And so full support. And I just also wanted to take an opportunity to say that one of the problems with public outreach like this is that it misses a constituency that I think should have more of a voice, which is, you know, people who don't currently live in Arcata, but could live in Arcata if, you know, density was increased and if more housing was constructed. I don't know how many people on this call are renters, but I'm a renter, and rent is super expensive, and it's expensive everywhere, and it's getting more expensive. And building more housing stock, especially housing stock that includes some affordable units, will just make Arcata a place that more kinds of people can live. I just sort of want to try to speak on behalf of those people, our future neighbors, our future business owners, and all the people who can't afford to live in Arcata right now, because I think this is a really, really good step in terms of making Arcata a more equitable and more a place that we can share with more folks. So thank you for all your work on this, and looking forward to commenting more in the future.
Mhm.
All right, thank you. Jim, you are up.
Hear me, David?
We can, yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you. Hi to the planning commissioner, excuse me, to the community development director, to the planning staff and the planning commission. My name is James Becker, and I live in a proposed gateway neighborhood. My question is concerning the marsh treatment system and its present and future capacity. I know it's presently being repaired and upgraded to address the existing capacity. It's also facing future retreat due to sea level rising at some point, and our existing sewer lines are pumped on a regular basis. And I've seen our storm drain DIs back up in downpours. And so what I'm wondering is, what is the plan to address the influx of 3,500 housing units? And will you be looking at the natural drainage as in GA11H? And are you considering planning for the modeling concerning the feature storm drainage we're looking at? And that's my question. So I should save time for more people. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jim. Patricia?
Can you hear me?
We can now, yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I live also in the Gateway District, and I want to start out by saying that I'm really excited about bringing infill into the area. It's a long overdue need for more housing. I love the idea of more biking, walking trails. That's one of the reasons why we moved to Arcata, so we could park our car and walk and bike everywhere. The green spaces, art installations, all of those I'm really excited for. But there's also a lot of concerns that I have. One is just the whole size of this plan. It'll bring 30%, up to 30% population growth to Arcata. So it's pretty huge impact. And I'm wondering, what is that impact going to be to our infrastructure, our wastewater treatment plant, our fire department, district, stormwater runoff, traffic, parking, utilities. I mean, there's a bunch of things. And then where will those sources of funding come from? Will that be coming from primarily the property taxes? There's also a concern of mine is that, they talk about housing for all mixed income levels. It doesn't address the house population at all. It's not even mentioned. There's the whole the whole coastal zone boundary pushing it south towards the bay, and with the whole expectation of the sea level rise, and it's pushing it into a major tsunami evacuation pathway. That's a concern of mine. I just think this whole plan is way so out of balance with the rest of Arcata. This supersedes the general plan. I think it's a burden that's being put on the Gateway District that isn't being put on the rest of Arcata. It's kind of feeling a little bit like a land grab for for the developers. It's making it really easy. It's making it kind of hard for, you know, the smaller person that just wants to build a 3-story building, doesn't want to build an 8 or 6-story building. So I just think I would really like to see this reshaped. I'd like to see this plan call for like more sensibility to our growth and put it back in the hands of the people to kind of be allowed to shape the vision of what they want Arcata to be and you know, and how it's going to prosper. So anyways, I think it's also an issue that no one knows about this. So anyways, thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you. Colin, go ahead.
Thank you. This is Colin Fisk again with CRTP, and we submitted some detailed comments on this yesterday. Not sure if you've had a chance to review those, but I encourage you to, because I will not be going through all the details tonight. But just in case you haven't read them yet, I wanted to just quote a few sentences from our letter that really sum up our position. This plan as it currently stands is clearly the most bike and pedestrian friendly land use plan ever proposed in our region. And because so many of our environmental impacts stem from transportation, and because the plan's proposed densities will allow much needed housing development to occur without encroachment into the natural environment surrounding the city, we believe it's also the most environmentally friendly land use plan ever proposed in our region. So we strongly support this plan and we encourage you to do the same. So that's the end of that quote. But I know a lot of people are worried about the increased density that the plan calls for and about how that will change Arcata, because it will obviously change the town, but not all change is bad. And I know I don't have to tell you, as we've already heard many times tonight, we're facing a housing crisis as well as a climate crisis. And we have to change our built environment, in particular by increasing density and mixed uses. And we have to do it pretty quickly if we're going to rise to the challenges posed by those crises. And I think that's exactly what this plan will help us do. So I hope you know that, at least as many people are excited about this plan as are worried about it. And I think once it's approved and its vision eventually comes to pass, even those folks who are worried about it now, I suspect will come to love it. So I hope that we do move this forward. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Daniel, you are up.
I'd like to thank the Planning Commission first off. I know it's a long night and you guys are working really hard. You're asking poignant and educated questions, and I appreciate that. I am concerned about a few things that I'll just share tonight. One is about flooding mitigation. I live in the Greenview neighborhood. I own a home there. Windsong and Greenview currently flood at least 2 times a year, where it becomes undrivable. There's only the Jolly Giant and Janes Creeks to go out to the bay, and they backflow because of the infrastructure has not been updated in some time. So I'm concerned about that with this new development. I'm also concerned when I read the plan about non-conforming business and relocation, and that relationship to possible eminent domain issues. And then I'm also concerned about building code modifications. The height of the buildings concerns me, but the code changes on those heights is important to pay attention to very closely. And also just the process of code changing and making sure that citizen engagement is in that process of code changing. In general, I think we need more community engagement and slow down this process. As someone that has been involved in the Plaza Task Force, I know how hard it is to actually reach out to citizens and have them engage, but it's essential, especially in this large of development. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Daniel. Kathy, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I'm a longtime Arcata resident and I live adjacent to the proposed Gateway Area project. And I just wanted to note that I'm really excited about this project and I support its continued development. I think that the vision for K Street as a vibrant, dynamic entrance to Arcata with bike and pedestrian lanes is wonderful. Although I agree with other speakers that to protect bikes and pedestrians, you need more than paint on the ground. You need some kind of barrier. So I hope that that's considered. I think the project is important for housing equity and availability and affordability. People are going to move here and we need to plan for that. But the most compelling reason I have for supporting the Gateway project is the impending climate crisis that is barreling toward us. It's too late to stop many of the horrific things that are coming, but if we act strongly everywhere that we can, we may be able to soften some of those blows. And this project seems to me to have the climate crisis in mind. Infilling with multifamily housing, supporting alternatives to car travel, creating walkable neighborhoods with green spaces, and encouraging green housing elements are all significant climate steps that we can take for ourselves and especially for our children and our grandchildren. So for these reasons, and because I believe it will be a positive and creative addition to our community, I support the Gateway Area Project. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Kathy. Call-in user 3. Call-in user 3, can you unmute?
Hi, can you hear
Looks
me?
like you're unmute. We can now, thank you.
Hey, this is Joanne McGreta, and I'm calling in because I've been listening on and off all night. And first of all, how it became titled the Gateway Area Plan is a concern to me because Gateway just opens up to me a lot of bad connotations. And I would like to understand why we have to keep calling it the Gateway Plan and maybe consider a different name. But that's a lower priority than other things I've been listening to tonight with people talking about what's happening in Valley West with the conversion of the Days Inn and the Red Roof Inn, and that neighborhood may be being targeted for a certain clientele or citizenry to live in that neighborhood. And then all of a sudden, the neighborhood I live in here near the Creamery District being all of a sudden designed in a high density way, and what's happening with Sunnybray and what's happening up the hill and Diamond and California streets and other neighborhoods in Arcata that right now are low density and could be increased in density. And why is all this happening just in one spot in the lowlands? And what Greg King said earlier about transportation, we really need to step back and really look at not just sustainable and infill and density, but we need to look at survivability and thrivability and lifestyle and what these large scale housing projects really mean to how people are going to have to live. And I just really think that we need to step back on this and we need to spread the wealth of our infill throughout other neighborhoods in Arcata. So thank you.
All right, thank you. And Melinda.
I'm here. Thank you. We own a property inside the Gateway District. We are in the little part that's cut off next to the area labeled J on your plan. And I've been concerned about the heights with respect to how they'll impact the existing, often historical homes in that neighborhood. While I agree with both Patricia and Jim and Greg and you that green space and trails and pedestrian and cycle safety are of utmost concern in Arcata. And the primary reason that I often choose to drive rather than walk. But I think we can do that with buildings of a maximum of 2 or 3 stories. I also think that reducing barriers to smaller developments by individual landowners, for example, developing mother-in-law units on their properties, are need to have the barriers reduced before we do something as large scale as this, that includes lots of reduction of barriers, but only for very wealthy developers. Second thing I'm concerned about has to do with beyond those who communicate mainly through these electronic means. So we have talked to a number of neighbors in the district, some of whom don't have computers and don't use them well. And I noticed that one way, here's just one example. There's a survey right now that the city is doing related to this project and other projects. But in order to get to the survey, you need to know how to use a QR code on your cell phone. And the neighbors that we're talking to don't have any idea what you're talking about. And I think we need to do a better job with outreach to make sure that we are hearing from lots of people impacted by these large scale development projects and not just a few well-connected young people, with most of whom are also able-bodied, and they have different concerns than someone who might be older or less able to get around. The last thing I want to say is, as someone who worked a lot with young people, I taught at Humboldt for almost 30 years and I had over 10,000 students, and I talked to them a lot about housing. The number one most desired place for a student is somebody's mother-in-law unit behind their house. It's not a giant 8-story building. And the reason is there's more privacy, it's considered more quaint, cuter. And when one of the students would score one of those kinds of properties, all of the other students would high-five them in congratulation. So I think, to echo Joanne's point, what we need to do is include greater infill density across a broader swath of Arcata. And I don't think we need an 8-story building anywhere, but I think we could do with some buildings in the neighborhood of 3 stories or 4, making sure that we don't over impact. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Melinda. Call-in user 2.
Hello.
Yeah, hi, we can hear you.
Hi. So I have the same concern as someone that called in about what is the plan for the future of all the existing businesses that will become non-conforming if you rezone. That's it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Una?
Hi, thank you very much. This is Una Smith. I am talking tonight on behalf of the Humboldt County Association of Governments, or HCOG. We are the Regional Transportation Planning Agency. And I just wanted to comment mostly on the conceptual side of the plan. But first, also to congratulate the city on making progress on the general plan. It's not easy to move forward and feel like you're making progress on 20-year plans and visions. So I congratulate you on all that and am excited for this public process to be underway. So we, as an agency, are all for the concepts of the multi-uses, both residential and transportation multi-uses that this plan supports. And that also will include multi-uses for business types, which we also know that can translate easily into more opportunities for equity, because you have different levels of incomes that have opportunities, again, not just for housing and businesses, but for transportation. Infill benefits the city very much for making it more financially viable for the city to actually upkeep the kind of infrastructure needed. We also like infill because of the human scale that affords it walkability, bikeability, and more people-centered neighborhoods that are not dominated so much by cars and dangerous speeds. We also appreciate the concepts of infill for improving the feasibility of public transportation. Public really can be enhanced when it has a larger ridership pool in a smaller geographic area. And also, of course, green space. This is great for all communities, I think, value green space. And we also recognize that the heights that you are envisioning, or at least some of the maximums that would not be everywhere, I understand, but would be allowable in some places, that does help preserve land. And lastly, HCOG really appreciates this kinds of planning for supporting meeting the climate goals. HCOG is starting to have targeted targets, I guess, for decarbonizing transportation as well as buildings. And we appreciate how this plan supports that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Una. Kevin, go ahead.
You hear me?
We can.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Kevin McKinney. I think, again, I say that I think you guys did a great job on the basic plan, and the transportation aspects, which I talked to David about that the other day, I think are phenomenal. I do think there are a few issues though, and I think that the community benefits should be shown a bit more for comment. I think that's the first time I've seen that. And like I say, if they become too cumbersome, you end up not getting any housing built. And I think that's the issue that we're facing in the state of California, whether people want to admit it or not. Housing is very, very expensive to build. Everything is just outrageously expensive. And, a lot of the low-income housing you see is government subsidized, which is great. And but I mean, if you can do these things, make these housing units smaller and things, those types of things and increased density can make housing more affordable. And I think you've gone a long ways to show that. I think the point though is that the zoning code has to reflect the vision. And in my world, it just never seems to get done. I think though that the city of Arcata does a good job of that. I think I've watched David doing work. He seems to get a lot of this stuff done, which is, very refreshing for me to see. I think the parking zone aspect where you're talking about parking in the zoning code, it needs to deal with car size. Nobody's driving around a 1973 Cadillac anymore. And we need to say that you're not going to have a parking space for a 1973 Cadillac. We got to get to that point. If you want this stuff to happen, you want high density, you need to deal with these things, because it's not just the parking size, it's also the maneuvering space of the car or the parking. And whether or not you want parking or not, you're still going to have parking. The public needs parking. Your project will fail without it. And so then again, nothing will get built. Mixed commercial is a great idea. It helps provide the no trip generation in these high density areas, but that is a two-edged sword. Those mixed commercial units need customers. And you're starting right now, those 8-story buildings down there in the Barrel District aren't built. Well, who's coming to support them? They cannot make it. So those are issues that need to be looked at. We still need, some on-street parking. And I would just say to you that I kind of quickly looked at something, and designers can get up to 40 units per acre in 3 stories quite easily and still have parking. It looks to me like what David, was doing in the Barrel District. It's seemingly set up for Humboldt State. You're not showing any parking. If those 8-story units were dorms, sure, they would work. And then you would have that group of people down there walking through the area. I think that's a great idea. And I just quickly say that M Street in front of my property, it doesn't have parking. I'd like you to look at that. It's going to be difficult for me to do what you're looking for in this plan
Kevin,
without that. So.
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt, Kevin. That 3 minutes has lapsed. So
I know, yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Aaron, you are up.
Hear me?
We can, yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, well, that's good segue there with Kevin on M Street. I'm across the way on M Street, and I was hoping that you guys would consider, out of respect for current residential uses, to consider upper story setbacks at the third or even second story when they interface with existing single-family residences. Just for the design of the neighborhood, just so it kind of conforms with current uses. I also think that you should consider upper story setbacks as an opportunity rather than a limitation, because it provides outdoor common areas for the residents of these apartment buildings. So kids can go out and actually see the sun and hang out outside, maybe, play cornhole, have garden boxes, learn how to ride a bike or something like that if there's little tracks up there, because, kids can't just live in apartments, get on the bus, go to school, come back on the bus, go back in their apartment, spend all their lives on a screen. They need to have some open spaces where they have some privacy, where from not public open spaces where they might have somebody hanging out that's maybe not so desirable, that likes to hang out in their public, private, open space. That may be a concern for parents. And then a couple things real quick about kind of some misconceptions on the transportation issues. The market is telling us that electric vehicles is the future, and that's where we're going. And so I look at some of these developments and I see that people are going to be parking probably, if not, a block away, maybe blocks away from the residence. And I just don't see how somebody charges their vehicle if they got to park 3 blocks away from their home, or even 2 blocks, or even 200 feet. I mean, how are these people going to charge their electric vehicles? And so the market's telling us that that's what the future is. And I don't see that in this plan. The other thing that I love the idea of biking. I just do a lot of walking in Arcata. You don't even have to bike, to be honest. You can just get on your feet and walk. But then what I see is people, saying, well, biking solves everything. But if you take your bike downtown to go get a bacon cheeseburger, you just squandered any of your good deeds for carbon emissions right there, because you just ate whatever you saved. And so just riding a bike isn't enough. We have to change our values altogether if we want to lower carbon emissions. Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. Go ahead, Dawn and/or Lindsay.
Yeah, there were just a couple concerns. One of them was the size height concern, and I kind of support Aaron in the, if we're going to go up, do a setback for it, because where we live at, there's a plan to do apartments essentially in front of us and behind us, allowing us like zero privacy at all at any time. And then I agree, like I walk all the time, lost 63 pounds, like we walk all the time. And I believe, cars aren't super great, but my one concern is, what about all the people that are going to move into these apartment complexes, right? Because we had talked about parking prior with you on one of the walks, and they're going to come with vehicles if they're families, even if they're low income. And we also have a bunch of elderly folks in the area that aren't able to ride their bikes, go electric, or walk everywhere. So it's just crazy to think that we're going to take out the ability for people to still, like largely drive their vehicles and have room for parking. So that was it.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Sherry.
Thank you. I'm really happy about several aspects of the Gateway Plan. A lot of people have mentioned improvements in traffic circulation. I think the new one-way extensions is a great idea. Provisions for bikes and pedestrians. And I think infill is fantastic too. Some concerns that I don't think anyone's mentioned tonight is that Cal Poly Humboldt is going to be adding 2,250 student housing units, and that's both on campus and at the Craftsman Mall. SB 9 and SB 10 are about to go into effect on January 1. That means that anyone in the city can change their single-family dwelling into 6 units with no input from the Planning Commission or the city. SB 10 would allow up to 14 units on a single lot if the city approves. So factoring all of those things together, can our infrastructure handle this? Who's going to pay for all the infrastructure that needs to be built is a question. Pretty sure there's brownfield cleanup to be done at the Barrel District site. Who pays for that? And when does the Coastal Commission weigh in? And is that part of the CEQA review? I'm new to this, so I don't have all the answers. My other big concern on this is the amenities. What's being classified as amenities, I think, are really necessities. Things like indoor bike parking and EV charging, especially affordable units. I don't think affordability should be traded for building height or extra stories on these buildings. The other problem is the assumption that creating more units is going to provide trickle-down affordability. Just like Reaganomics, trickle-down economics, we all know that hasn't worked. Well, more units creates more people coming, and unless affordability is mandated.
I'm sorry, Sherry, can you wrap up your comment? I think that was 3 minutes.
Oh my, okay, I'm done.
Okay, thank you. I believe that is all the people who wanted to comment at this point.
Great. Anyone else have anything to say? Any of the commissioners? Any follow-up questions, or y'all getting kind of tired?
I need to drop off myself.
Okay, we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. But before we do, I want to congratulate Dylan Savage for 12 years at the City of Arcata. He's our IT guy that's making all this work. Today is his 12-year anniversary. We appreciate you, Dylan. Okay, if there's nothing else.
If I could just say one thing to the comments about, people feeling like they haven't had enough engagement, or folks that want to continue the discussion. I am making myself available and our staff available to talk to small groups, whether that's a neighborhood or an organization. So please reach out to us if you want to schedule a stakeholder meeting with us, and we'll have several other engagements planned for January.
Great. Okay, thank you. This meeting is adjourned. Have a nice evening, everybody.
Thanks.